but you also can't deny how much better the team overall got in Cleveland. You know, 2 running backs that can run like that, the best offensive line in football, receivers that were getting the job done, and a Jarvis Landry kind of guy. So, I mean, this team got better for sure at the end. It wasn't just because Odell, it just was one of those weird coincidences. But in some weird way, maybe it helps the Browns because Odell now saw him win without him.
Right.
Now, and if he's willing now to just fit back into the group, maybe the whole group gets elevated. Well, welcome into the Cris Collinsworth podcast featuring my pal Richard Sherman, who is still trying to figure out exactly where he's going to be playing football next season. So we'll welcome him back at the appropriate time, we hope. And we always want to say a special thanks to our friends at DraftKings and the DraftKings Sportsbook. We have a great podcast today. Steve Palazzolo, our NFL expert, part of the PFF NFL podcast with Sam Monson, but they are all over these off-season rankings right now. We'll do the offensive line. We'll talk about some of that. But mostly we're just going to go team by team. I don't know how you are at this point in the year, but there have been so many different things with the free agency and the draft and trades and who's playing for whom at this point. So we just kind of take one broad stroke at the entire league, and it's a little bit longer than what I'm used to doing here, but it was almost like a homework session for me. So I was excited to get a chance to do it. And Steve is remarkable with what he can do off the top of his head with the league. So, but before we get there, a reminder to check out all the really great podcasts on PFF Network. It's already fantasy season, believe it or not. The PFF Fantasy Football Podcast with Ian Hartitz has you covered with all the ramifications of that Julio Jones trade and anything else that breaks this summer. So never too early to start getting those good bets in either. And PFF Forecast with George and Eric. Make sure you never miss a bet and that you're the smartest football mind in any friend group that there is. So check out all the great podcasts right here on PFF and the YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. So now, here we go. Talking all things to all teams with Steve Palazzolo. All right, here we go. We've got the Cris Collinsworth podcast with a very special guest today. I'm always so jealous of the fact that Steve and Sam get to sit around and talk ball for 2 hours every week and get paid to do it. Like, it's my favorite part of PFF is I can come in here and I can just sit around with people who know more about it than I do, have watched all the games, which I never get a chance to do, and I can just take in knowledge and drink it in. And you guys and your podcast, the NFL podcast, have been remarkable. Millions and millions and millions of viewers tuning in on a weekly basis. Welcome to the other side of the aisle here. Welcome to the CC podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's nice to have you in podcast land with us, right? It's good. It's a new world for you. How's that been going this past season?
Good. It's been great. It's been interesting. We've had great guests on and interviews, and Richard Sherman was a part of it forever and a day. And so many different interesting people to talk to. But I do miss the picture of you with the blown out. That was awesome. Yeah, I mean, it legitimately is like out to here, right? Your hair.
Monster afro. We had a big afro show, because Sam loves to just poke fun at my appearance.
Really? I would never know that. I would
a little height, hair, whatever it is. And when he realized I could grow the fro like that, which I hadn't done in like 8 or 10 years, he said, we got to make it happen. So we made it happen.
I told him the story of Anthony Munoz when he was pitching at USC. People don't realize that one of the greatest football players of all time was a pitcher at USC. And he had the afro that was out to there, 300 pounds of Anthony Munoz standing on the mound. I was like, I would have been hitting from the on-deck circle. There's no way I'm walking anywhere close. And he goes, with good reason, too. He was on our softball team. And he played shortstop. I mean, you can imagine the DBs and the wide receivers on that team and the athletes that were on there. But he could scoop it. He could backhand it. And when he threw it, you could hear it coming.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, so they ended up putting me on first base, which I'd never played first base in my life, just because they had to have somebody who could hopefully catch this friggin' thing. It was whistling across there. Big afro and all, man. It was awesome.
What an athlete.
Oh, he's amazing. Great guy. Better guy, too. All right, we are going to go through. So I'm just going to get my fix in. So I don't get to do this very often, but I love doing this. I've been reading all the PFF positional rankings and studying them, and I've got them on one sheet of paper, and you're trying to help me get this thing organized and the whole thing. So I thought we'd just kind of go through and try to go team by team a little bit here. And just off the top of your head, you know, what we're thinking about. And I've been taking some notes here as well. So we just go, and I know everybody always goes in alphabetical order. How about if we start at the other end?
That works.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Let's just start with the Washington football team and where we're going from here with these guys. Obviously, they won the division, only 7-9 a season ago. But when you start, and I always tell people that when I'm studying the league and where I think people make mistakes, where surprises come from are with defensive-oriented football teams.
They were the team a year ago. At this time, they didn't look like a great defensive team, and that's kind of the nature of it, right? You can't always predict, great defensive performances, but they were so good on the defensive line last year, and they'll be the same this year. They added Chase Young too, the Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweats and Daron Paynes of the world. But I always look at the secondary, and it's one of those PFF axioms that, I look at Eric Eager and some of the research that our team has done, and this was one of those I said, what, really? Like the coverage unit is going to determine success more than the pass rush. But Washington was so good on the defensive line last year. Their secondary was fantastic. But I really love a lot of what they've done this offseason too. Bringing in William Jackson, our top free agent corner. We'll talk about Fitz magic at some point, but just add in the playmakers too. So when I look at teams, I look at the perimeter, right? A lot of people look in the trenches. I look in the perimeter. I think their secondary, they added a guy like William Jackson. On the perimeter, it's wide receiver Curtis Samuel. It's Adam Humphries. De'Ami Brown in the draft, I think, could be a nice deep threat. So
my
they
guy,
have improved.
I had him as a first rounder. I loved him.
So they have these pieces, and then Fitzpatrick is his last 3 years, best PFF grades of his career. This is the best 3-year stretch of his career, and he's 37. So, Washington I think their roster's gotten better and better.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel comes over, certainly to add an element. But, maybe the most important part has been Ron Rivera coming in and just stabilizing things. Do you get a feeling with that organization, with the whole Haskins thing and there was always the Daniel Snyder was tied to him and who's really in control. You just get a feeling that Rivera has just stabilized that place and that now they're building something. A lot of doubt as to whether or not would they be the team that moved up to go get a quarterback. But Fitzmagic is going to, he's at least as good as what they had playing quarterback last year, right?
Definitely better. They had Haskins was one of the guys. Had Kyle Allen for a little bit, and then Alex Smith. I love the Alex Smith story. It was fantastic. But he's a conservative guy that didn't play great last year. The thing about Fitzpatrick is he's just going to bring like the YOLO balls, right? You chuck it up and let your guys.
No doubt about that.
Right?
Ask the Raiders about that last year. That
oh
was
my gosh,
unbelievable.
But that was like on point. It was YOLO. You only live once. Chuck it up there. But man, it got where it needed to go. So Fitzpatrick's going to give McLaurin and Samuel and De'Ami. He's going to give those guys, and Logan Thomas, he's going to give them opportunities to make plays. The Rivera aspect, it is one of the toughest things to quantify, though, is the coaching aspect. It's easy for us. We grade every player, and this looks good, and that looks good. There's only a handful of coaches, though, I think that really stabilizes a great way to put it and elevate what they have, and Rivera has a history of doing it.
Well, and they saw what he did, what he went through with the cancer last year, and when I had him on the podcast, he was, it was unbelievable. In our production meeting before the game, I asked him, I said, what would it mean if this team snuck back into the playoffs here? And he kind of got choked up because the journey that he had from training camp last year, and it was obviously from a coaching standpoint, the most difficult year of all time with COVID, and now he's dealing with his own cancer. He can't even stand up to coach this team. And he did. He kind of got choked up. And, for a guy who's as stable and big and strong, it was quite the moment for us in our production meeting. Let's go on to the Tennessee Titans now. And, of course, they're in the news here with Julio. There were some questions about them not doing enough. They really have major changeover going over in the secondary right now. But if they end up hitting on this Caleb Farley, I think we all watch Caleb Farley and we go, I mean, that's like Deion speed back there in the cornerback position, one of their draft picks, their first round. But he's had a couple of back surgeries. There's a lot of uncertainty there. So did this defense get good enough fast enough?
I don't know if they're good enough. It really is the big question in the secondary. Janoris Jenkins is a playmaker. He's good, a good, solid starting corner. Farley is a lot like what they have on the offensive side. There's so many games where the Titans' best players just took over. Like A.J. Brown just decided against the Ravens, I'm not going to get tackled. I'm going to break 7 tackles on this play and get in the end zone. And Derrick Henry's had plays like that where those guys just take over. Caleb Farley's like the equivalent to that on the defensive side. You mentioned Deion. I mean, he's 6'2", incredible makeup speed, length, everything you're looking for. It's just that injury question mark. But the questions that Tennessee had this offseason, I mean, they lost so much in free agency, and they slowly added back to the roster with Farley in the draft, with Janoris Jenkins a little bit later in free agency. And then they looked like we ranked the wide receivers and tight ends. They were 5th worst, but they have A.J. Brown, who is a stud, and they were 5th worst in our rankings as of a week ago because after A.J. Brown, they had nobody. But when you add Julio Jones to the mix, okay, there's another guy that could take over a game. So it just feels like a top-heavy roster with A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Derrick Henry, guys like Caleb Farley, and then Tannehill running the show. He's been so good these last couple of years. If he can keep it going, they're right in the mix. But they needed to make this Julio Jones move because I feel like that whole offense, their playmakers were really starting to fall apart. But Julio brings it back together.
Jonnu Smith, a little bit of a weapon out of there going over to New England. But, as long as Derrick Henry stays healthy, and they know who they are. Yeah. Arthur Smith now no longer there. We got to find out, right? How much of it was him and how much of it was somebody else. So Tampa Bay Bucks, they now have proven that they're the new New England. People are signing up there because they want to go win a ring. But more importantly, the team and the coaching staff returns intact.
Everything.
I've never seen anything even remotely close to that. And you go through the playoffs last year, and arguably the team that came closest to beating them was Washington.
Right.
In the first round, right? I mean, that was because as they went through, now Green Bay certainly had a shot at them. New Orleans, had a lead late, but Washington kind of was hanging in there. And then in the Super Bowl, nobody could ever tell me that holding them to 9 points wasn't one of the greatest things we've ever seen in a Super Bowl. The Miami Dolphins back in the day actually pitched a shutout defensively in the Super Bowl because it wasn't for the Garo Yepremian flop, would have been 14-0 in that game. But that was one of the greatest defensive performances we'd ever seen.
The Bucks, I like to look at teams and say, how many ways do you have to win, right? And the Bucks they can win any given way. Offensively, you can spread the ball around and pass it. They try to run it a lot. They don't run it all that efficiently, but they've got a really good offensive line. And then defensively, they've got the pass rush. And so when I look at the Bucks this year, I look at, okay, what can go wrong? Because it's easy to just say, well, everybody's back. Everything's going to look exactly like it did last year. But what could go wrong? Obviously, there's injuries. And then we always talk about the secondary being just volatile, right? So they've got all these young guys, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean and Antoine Winfield at safety. So what could go wrong is maybe the secondary takes a step back and they give it up. They give it up a little bit more in the pass game, or that offensive line gets hurt. When they hit their little lull last year,
Ali Marpet.
Yeah. So they had injuries, on the interior of the offensive line. Now they had the luxury of going into the draft saying, I'm getting a backup quarterback. I'm getting a backup swing tackle who could play guard, Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame. I'm getting a number 6 wide receiver, Jalen Darden, who could probably play in the slot for half the teams around the NFL. So they had that luxury. They've got depth too. But man, they look good. The only other thing that can go wrong too is Tom Brady's 44. And every year we say, okay, can he do it again? Right?
I'm totally with you. But if you would have told me that Tristan Wirfs was going to dominate the way that he did, that was stunning at that right tackle position. But you go through and there's 3 deep at tight end. You know, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, Rob Gronkowski, and Gronkowski was hurt much of last year. I watched him block in the middle part of the season. He didn't want to contact anybody. His back his shoulder. I think his shoulder was messed up a season ago. But you put together Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. This Tyler Johnson was a good-looking young player. Scotty Miller out there.
Miller as a deep threat. I mean, he got behind the defense 4 or 5 times a year.
And now you're going to have Giovanni Bernard. Yeah, I don't think anybody in Green Bay is ever going to forget that one. But now you've got Giovanni Bernard going over there as sort of that receiving element. And I know what we've all joked about Leonard Fournette, but Leonard Fournette in the playoffs in the Super Bowl, he was a bull.
He made plays.
Yeah, he made plays for him. I mean, there's no question. So, but I agree with you. I think the question was going into the year about the defense, and particularly the secondary, but I've seen that happen quite a bit too. And I've heard you guys talk about it, that you just keep throwing resources at the secondary. And that's what they've done in Tampa. And sometimes it all sort of comes together. And when Carlton Davis starts to get some attention, Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy Bunting, those guys all want to be in that mix too. Antoine Winfield Jr., I thought, played a little like his daddy did. You know,
he was great. Yeah.
He's a hustling, ball hawking kind of guy. So, and Devin White and Levante David are amazing inside. I mean, they can do exactly what they're looking to get done with Todd Bowles' defense, which is they want to rush 5. And they want to be able to match up and play some man coverage. Although it's interesting, that philosophy got crushed by the Chiefs in the first matchup.
First time around, yeah.
And then the second matchup, they come back and you didn't see man coverage anywhere. You know, it was just all zone and they got it done. So
yeah, they're scary, the Bucs.
They are scary. They're just scary. They're going to be scary good. Would you pick them this year? Would you take them to win?
I would take them. Yeah, I just think I'm not going to doubt Brady until he shows me I need to. And even just Evans and Godwin, they were banged up throughout the year. Antonio Brown missed a playoff game, but because you build that depth, you can win games with Mike Evans with no hamstring, and you can win games with Chris Godwin, out and Brown out. They just have so much depth, and I trust Brady. I can't believe Brady took to that offense as well as he did. I'm the biggest Brady fan there is, and I still doubted that he could execute that way in a COVID year and all that stuff. So.
And now in their second year, they're going to have the Tom Brady training camp and the coaching, and I think they're going to be tough to beat too. Let's go to Seattle now. Seattle, did it surprise you at all that they drafted Eskridge, the wide receiver? They didn't get a pick in the first, right? That he was a second-round guy, but sort of that same MO, a big, strong, physical, fast as hell kind of receiver. But they did fall off a little bit when the big two, were taken out of games last year.
Yeah, I think they only had 3 draft picks, so I think it forced their hand. And I love talking about team building. I just love talking about that philosophy and everything. And it's one of those things where they're making these huge trades during the season, right? They're getting Carlos Dunlap, which was a nice trade. They get Jamal Adams, of course. And then it doesn't really hit you until February, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do in free agency? What are we going to do in the draft? And you only have 3 draft picks. So they had to essentially fill needs. And I do think they said DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, great 1 and 2. But you're right. When they weren't there or when Lockett was banged up, that passing offense just didn't have it. So you got to have that third option. I just think in today's NFL, wide receiver 3 is a starter. Wide receiver 4. If you have a good 4th wide receiver, that means 1 through 3 are really good. That's how you win. You win by telling by the defense looking at your team saying, I don't know how I'm going to cover everybody. So an Eskridge makes sense from that sense. I'm also interested in Shane Waldron coming over from the Rams, right? Because Russ just throws it down the field. It's been this vertical attack. But the Rams system, McVay tree, Shanahan tree, it's horizontal stretches as well. That was what Seattle couldn't do against that Rams defense last year. They could not stretch the field horizontally. I think Eskridge brings that element. So I think they just targeted, we need this in our offense. Let's go get this speed and agility in this third threat to add to the wide receiver mix.
Russell Wilson, probably the story of the offseason there, not happy. I really think that Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers watched the respect that Tom Brady was given in Tampa, right?
Yeah.
Listen to me. Just listen to my ideas. Russell's with his offensive line and Aaron's with, can I not at least pick a fifth-round wide receiver that I like, kind of thing. And it was almost like LeBron James, the way you would have to coach or be general manager to him. Like, he has to be included, right? He has to be included in those conversations. And I really do think that for those two quarterbacks, they were looking at what was happening in Tampa and going, yeah, see, they're letting Tom help build this thing. And Bruce Arians, I believe, is just adding fuel to the fire, going, yeah, he's like a coach for us. We just let him go with the players just to try and get both of them traded out of the NFC, right?
Yeah,
so he can walk through to the Super Bowl there. So,
but Brady just spent 20 years in New England with the opposite, right? I mean, Peyton and Brady were always the guys being compared, and you'd say, well, Peyton's the coach on the field and he runs practice, whereas Brady was just like the good soldier that came in and he had some game plan suggestions, but he was a player. He was the best player, but he was a player, right? So it's not like Brady's been doing this for 20 years, but the Tampa thing, I think, did bring a little bit of that. And Russ got bold. That was bold, Russ, early in the offseason.
As bold as he gets. It was, but it's sort of like you've got to keep your best people happy and engaged too. You've got to, as management, you've got to take some of that on. So
you got to keep me engaged, Chris. You got to keep me going.
I'm working on it. It's hard to do with that much hair. But what do we have? We have no vacation limits. You want a vacation? Go on vacation.
People were asking about that. New policy over here.
You want to come to the office? Come to the office. You don't want to come to the office? Don't come to the office. It's the greatest place on earth to work. So please come work with us.
Certainly
We'd
is.
love to have you here. The Pittsburgh Steelers. This is probably. They're not happy with PFF.
They're not.
They're not happy with PFF. And so it's easy for you guys. You sit here in this studio, and I've got to go on the front lines over there every time we do one of their games. It was a rough go this year, but I do give George Chahuri credit. At 11-0, he's saying this is the most overrated team, and they really fell apart coming down the stretch. Now, no Marquise Pouncey, no Alejandro Villanueva. Mike Hilton's gone. James Conner. I mean, Matt Filer is a good player. There's Bud Dupree's out of there. So this is a different looking team. My question for you is, do you think that the offense now reverts to Pittsburgh Steeler form? It had constantly moved away from a running game approach first and became Ben Roethlisberger and all the time. And then he got hurt, and then they switched from Ben battling around in the pocket to quick throw Ben. Nobody got the ball out of his hand faster. Times they look fantastic. They go out and they were 11-0. Maybe teams caught up with it. And then, so now what do you do? If you're the owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, are we going back to Franco Harris days? We drafted a running back. Is that what's happening now?
I think that's what they want to do. I don't know if that was the best move. And look, everyone else at PFF is going to say, bad offseason, definitely shouldn't have drafted a running back in the first round. And I certainly agree with all that. Because I'm on Pittsburgh radio once a week too, Chris. So I'm kind of on the front lines.
Yeah, but they can't punch you over the radio.
No, not like you are. But I put it out there, like I don't like a lot of the moves they've made. This was not an exciting offseason for them. The one thing I said was if this makes them get away from that quick passing game, which was just unproductive last year, if it does make them run the ball more, but also run more play action, and Matt Canada is there as offensive coordinator, and he likes to run jet sweeps every single play, loves motion. Those are some of like the cheat codes for the passing game. It just, anytime you do something that moves a defender, it helps your passing attack. So Pittsburgh got away from all of that stuff. Roethlisberger likes static. He doesn't like turning his back to the defense. So if they convince him to run more play action and attack down the field, even though he looked bad throwing the ball down the field last year, I think their best bet is attacking down the field with Deontay Johnson, with Chase Claypool, with Juju, Pat Freiermuth, who they get in the draft, a pretty good second-round tight end. They have to let those guys make plays. Even though Najee Harris was the first-round draft pick and they're going to feed him, if this leads to more downfield passing, to me, that's the best chance for the Steelers to replicate those 12 wins from last year. And or whatever it is. Go 12-5 now. The 17-game schedule throwing me off.
But if you're going to have a brand new offensive line, are you not almost forcing it to be run game, quick throws?
So that's the big question. 3 new starters, and the guys they're replacing them with are massive question marks. They got a core of 4 played at right tackle last year. He was bad. Zach Banner's played 300 snaps in his career. Kendrick Green, J.C. Hassenauer, they're going to replace Marquise Pouncey for whatever that's worth. So, yeah, you have to protect them too. But I think motion and play action, anything that's getting the defense looking somewhere else is keeping them off the quarterback. It's slowing down the pass rush, all those cliches. And they're going to need to do it. Yeah, you can't trust this offensive line, I don't think, to block for 3 seconds. So, trickeration in Pittsburgh.
Are you convinced that Najee Harris is the answer? I know that we go offensive line first.
I like him a lot as a player. Like I always have to preface that, right? He's a really good player. Yeah. He's a really good receiver. He's got a good feel. I think he'll be productive, but most guys are only as productive as their run blocking, and the Steelers had the lowest run blocking grade in the NFL last year.
The hardest part, and I think the reason I would never draft a running back in the first round, is we know second contracts are generally huge fall-offs for the running back position. And no matter who it is or how good they are, realistically, if you just look at the math, you shouldn't be signing them to big second-year contracts. And,
right.
I think Dallas has figured that out at this point too. Yeah. He's a good player, but
most teams look around the NFL. They do off-season studies all the time, and they say, well, what are the Chiefs doing? What are the Bills doing? What are the Bucs doing? And, of course, you've got great quarterbacks and all that stuff, but they're spreading the field with playmakers that are difficult to cover, and their running backs are all pretty much interchangeable other than maybe Tennessee and Derrick Henry. So I think you got to do with what historically is successful, and it's still a pass-first league.
How about the Philadelphia Eagles? Big changes, right? In Philadelphia, Nick Sirianni comes in, offensive coordinator under Frank Reich, who, of course, was the offensive coordinator when they went to the Super Bowl a few years ago. Doug Peterson out as the head coach there. Jalen Hurts now steps in. They could have stayed put and drafted a quarterback, no question about it, when they lost that last game in controversial matter. But they could have stayed put. They could have had Fields. They could have had Mac Jones if they wanted it. They trade up and down and do all that, and they end up with the Heisman Trophy winner. So you can't argue with that. But Devontae Smith is not going to be the quarterback mover on the Richter scale that maybe those other guys could have been.
Yeah, and especially with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. I mean, he's not going to be he's going to be used as part of the design run game a ton, right? So you're going to play around his skill set, which is we're going to run power and counter, and he's going to keep it, and it's a Lamar-esque type of offense or Taysom Hill-esque type of offense where the quarterback has to be a part of the run game. I think the interesting thing here is, again, sometimes at PFF we live in it sounds like we live in spreadsheets in our robotic
we do.
World, right? Yeah. So theoretically, we would tell you, keep drafting quarterbacks, right? Keep drafting. You never know when you're going to hit. So I loved the Jalen Hurts pick, but what backfired is you just didn't know what it was going to do to the mental state of your starter. And even though I was a former pro athlete like you, Chris, and I know that stuff exists.
We're all mentally weak.
Yeah, I knew that stuff exists, but now I'm in spreadsheet world. I'm like, I'll just keep drafting quarterbacks. They'll handle it. But Carson Wentz didn't handle it. So now I think the Eagles said, we can't do that to Jalen Hurts now. We can't go draft someone else and do that to Jalen. So we're stuck with Jalen Hurts, at least for a year, and we're going to build around him. It feels like such a rebuilding year, though, because of veterans leaving. We don't know what you're going to get from Hurts. Devontae Smith's a fantastic player, but they still have more work to do at receiver. So it feels like a big rebuild in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it does. It really just does. So, all right, let's go on. Who's next on my list here? I'm going back up the list. The New York Jets. Now, Robert Saleh takes over there, and I know Robert well. I've interviewed him 1,000 different times. He takes over for Adam Gase in that position. No more Sam Darnold, right? And we go Zach Wilson in there now. I really like Zach Wilson. I was almost embarrassed how much I liked Zach Wilson because you could also see the level of competition wasn't there. He wasn't getting hit. He was just standing back playing like flag football. You know, he never really had to worry about what might happen. But there was magic with that guy too. I mean, he's that good-looking guy with perfect hair that just everything kind of comes out of his hands so effortlessly, and he moves easily around the pocket. And it was impossible for me to watch him and not go, this is all the same stuff I'm saying about Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, there it is.
I know. And how do you not go there with him, though?
David Pollack, I think, was the first one who said Zach Wilson's doing Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers type of stuff, right? And the thing I'm always, and he was, right? I mean, it is just flick of the wrist stuff and far hash out routes and various things like that. And just those little subtle movements in the pocket and getting the ball where it needed to go. The only thing I'm hesitant about is, are we overrating those things because of what we've most recently seen in the NFL? Or is that a necessary part of playing quarterback? Is just feel and, reaction plays and all that stuff. Zach Wilson, I think, definitely has that. And then we talk about the Shanahan scheme a ton. That's what they're bringing over there. The Shanahan system has just a great success of elevating quarterbacks. And in the Matt Schaubs of the world, right? And the Kirk Cousins of the world, it elevates those quarterbacks. But when they get a guy that can work outside the system too, which is what the Rams are trying to do with Matthew Stafford, then it's like, all right, this is tough to stop. So if Zach Wilson is as advertised, Jets fans should be really excited. You never really know until you see him out there, but he's got everything you're looking for, other than, we need to see him do it against high-level competition. But he's got that magic and feel that you're looking for in today's NFL.
Mike LaFleur is the coach now, the offensive coordinator you're talking about, Matt LaFleur's little brother who'd been in the Shanahan system forever and a day, and I agree with you. In Saleh's system, so much of that, sort of quarters coverage and athletic linebackers that can run and cover. So I just sat and watched this quarters coverage for a while, and you go, okay, what makes it click? And it's sort of those interior three. So you got the front four rushing, and then you've got three coverage guys, but in reality, there's nobody really covering the flat. So they have to sort of match up in the interior, those three linebackers. So you need really athletic guys that can cover on the inside. The 49ers certainly have that. Do we have that with the Jets? Do we have that sort of ability to unleash that defense in the way that they want to play it?
No, I'm definitely most worried about their entire back seven. I mean, the corners, because when you play quarters too, your corners are on an island. They're not always in press, but they are on an island.
Yeah, especially if that slot receiver comes running vertical up the field.
Yeah.
Now as an outside corner, you've got the post. That's where they hit all the big touchdowns.
And they've evolved this. This was a Seattle cover 3 where they play more quarters, but it's still the same idea. You need smart corners. When you had Gruden on the podcast and Sherman was breaking down the defense, he was breaking down John's defense to him. It was great, but it showed just what the left corner needs to be able to read on a given play and understanding concepts and all that stuff. That's what makes the Seattle cover 3 work. And then they, again, in San Francisco, they evolved and added more quarters and all that stuff. But yeah, CJ Mosley coming back is fine. Jared Davis has been a good blitzing linebacker for the majority of his career. You do that 100 times a year out of 1,000 snaps. So that's not a good thing. He's struggled in coverage. So I really like the Jets' team building effort. I think the O-line's moving in the right direction. Offensive playmakers, Zach Wilson. Defensive line is really, really good. And that could mask over some of these issues. Next offseason, it's about the back seven, adding talent there. So I think they're still a year away from really taking that next step.
Marcus May is supposed to be a player.
He's really
right?
good.
Yeah.
He's a really good player. They have about 6 fifth-round corners on their roster, though. That's what's out there. And guys that haven't really done it successfly at the NFL level.
I get a little help. Carl Lawson was a nice player here in Cincinnati. And
I think Quinnen Williams, too, could be their third overall pick a couple years ago. Big breakout year for him. Yeah,
it's I'm really interested to see what they might be able to do. I'm trying not to get excited about Zach Wilson. This Elijah Vera Tucker. Do you think he can make it? Are they going to play him at tackle, at guard?
I think they want him to play left guard. If they had him
with
compete,
Becton over there, that'd be a hell of a left side.
That'd
anyway.
be really good.
Yeah,
Becton kills people, just crushes people. But if they have Vera Tucker in an honest competition with George Fant at right tackle, I think Vera Tucker could be the starting right tackle. And that might be the best spot for him.
He was good. He was good at left tackle playing last year, right?
He got beat up a little bit. Oregon game.
Yeah. Definitely the Oregon game. Yeah. He got crushed in that one.
He's a good enough tackle. I think he could be a really good guard. That's what the Jets saw too. That's why they went and got him.
Yeah. All right. Let me move on up here to the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants are going to have a receiving core that is going to leave no question anymore that they've got to get it done, right? Yeah. I mean, Jason Garrett and this offense, they just simply have got to get it done. And then they add this Kadarius Toney, who I don't know who in God's green earth can cover him if you just put him on in the slot with some of those one-on-one moves and just let that guy rip. But do they have the offensive line? I heard your offensive line show the other day.
Yeah.
You were backpedaling as best you could about not having them ranked last, but they were 32nd.
Yeah, they were last in our offensive line rankings. Again, I can see how they could improve and maybe not rank last. But the goal, we always say, creep back toward average. You really can't win in today's NFL with a bad offensive line. You don't need a great one. It at least has to be like middle of the pack. It can't be a massive weakness. So for the Giants to improve their offensive line from not a weakness, they need last year's first rounder Andrew Thomas to take a huge step forward. What
happened to him anyway? We loved him coming out of Georgia, right?
Yeah, Georgia. He changed his technique a little bit. Our guy Mike Renner from 2-for-1 Drafts podcast, he was watching him really closely, saying he kind of changed his pass sets a little bit, and he cleaned him up a little bit in the second half of the year. But then he had the game against Arizona. Hassan Reddick had 5 sacks. They weren't all on Thomas, but he got whooped up in that game. So he was just a disappointment. He was a disappointment as a rookie. So technique issues in year one, but he's got to get better. Their 3rd round pick, Matt Parrott, he could be a good player. He's got to get better. I think Nate Solder might be a cut, but he's generally an average type of tackle. And then the interior, they missed on Will Hernandez a couple years ago at guard. He might not even start this year. They pulled Nick Gates up from tackle and guard to play center. So none of those guys performed well last year. Look, we see guys improve. We see guys improve in years 2, 3, and 4 in the NFL. They just need that to happen. And then if they do, you're right about this receiving core. They are going to be tough to cover.
I mean, you go right down the list. Kenny Golladay was no question the top free agent out there, right? I mean, he was
and Allen Robinson, like right in that. But they got franchise, right? Yeah. Absolutely, Golladay.
Tony, we talked about Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton. I mean, these are guys that can all play. I mean, it's just a matter.
Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph, Saquon Barkley.
Evan Ingram, yeah. Saquon Barkley should be awesome. I mean, there is certainly enough there where you go, Daniel Jones, here you go, baby. It's time, right? The other part of this team, though, when's the last time, I was reading an article, it's like, when's the last time this team had a real pass rusher, short of back to the days of JPP and Strahan and Umanura, right, and Tuck and all those guys. And that's how they won their Super Bowls. That was the cornerstone. They got after Tom Brady, right? They did that, and they moved defensive ends inside, and they got pressure on them. Have they gotten away from that?
Yeah, they have. I mean, this has been, they had a guy like Marcus Golden there for a little bit, and Golden would, rack up a few sacks, but it took them like 500 rushes to get there. They haven't had a dominant rusher in a while. But that was early last decade. That was what they were known for, and that slowly got worse and worse. I was impressed with their defense last year, and it's a Belichickian defense right now where it feels like it's built back to front. They'll scheme up some pressure. They'll kind of, create a little indecision up front with blitz schemes and all that stuff. But the secondary could be really good as well because they bring in when Adoree Jackson is healthy, he's one of the better corners in the NFL. James Bradbury had a great year last year getting him out of the NFC South where he's got to cover all those great wide receivers. Jabril Peppers, Logan Ryan is a great safety slot hybrid. Julian Love is similar. So they've added a ton to that secondary. So that's where they're going to win, right? They're going to win by making the quarterback hold it a little bit longer and make up maybe for that subpar pass.
Bradbury was amazing. Did you ever see that coming when you went to New York, that he would end up being that kind of player?
Not that kind of breakout season, but you definitely saw like, man, he's a pretty good player, but he's covering Mike Evans and Chris Godwin one week. He's covering Julio Jones the next week. He's covering, the Saints, everybody, Michael Thomas, and everybody that Drew Brees is, attacking him with. So part of cornerback production is who you face. And that was a big thing. And Bradbury has always showed he's always been a solid player, but you saw it, production-wise on the field last year.
So then we'll move to the New Orleans Saints, and obviously big changes going on there with Brees now coming to work with us at NBC, and Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill, I suppose. Do you have any gut feeling on how this is going to shake out this year?
Are they bringing Brees in for like red zone plays or anything?
I don't know. I don't know. Who knows whose place he'll be taking? Nobody knows.
Oh, that's it's just like on the field. We don't know what's going to happen with Jameis. We don't know what's going to happen with Taysom Hill. I feel like Jameis is the starter, right? I feel like he's going to be the guy.
I would think so, because then you get the benefit of both of them, right? If Jameis starts, then you still can do the Taysom Hill package, which is an effective package. And basically you're making defenses get ready for two different offenses.
Yeah.
And I've got to think that Sean Payton is enough of a quarterback coach that after a year of watching Brees and being able to go, see, Jameis, here's what we do, here's why we do it, and I also think that Jameis maybe has matured a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, even back in the days when they were doing some of that stuff for, the Hard Knocks show, and you could see him, and he's like you could almost see some of his teammates looking at him like, okay, you're the quarterback, whatever you say, but and he's a little older now, he's a little more mature. But it's an interesting situation. The Saints have so much there, the two great tackles and Thomas, and the ability, with Sean to just make up stuff. They're just a great offensive team. It would be hard to put them in the mix with Tampa right now, though, wouldn't it?
It is. I'm concerned about. I can't wait to see. I want to see a full season of Jameis in this offense. Because we've never seen him not playing an offense that just chucked it down the field. And is that because he had Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, and he had, just coaches that were aggressive, right? He played for Bruce Arians his last year, the guys that like to throw the ball down the field. So is he going to change, or is he going to take the Sean Payton offense, which was a lot of underneath stuff with Brees, in part because that's what he does, is he going to make it his own, or is he going to adjust to it? My concern is the receivers, though. My concern is, who are you trying to cover? I always come back to this, right? Like, there's not a lot of teams around the NFL with one good receiver and that move the ball effectively offensively. So who do you have to cover beyond Michael Thomas? Jared Cook's gone. Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Yeah. Traquan Smith's a good number 3. Deontay Harris is a good. I love him as a change of pace. Chuck it down the field and jet sweep stuff every now and again. And if Drew Brees was the quarterback, I'd be concerned about that. But you would still say, Drew's going to find the open man. You got Kamara out of the backfield. He'll figure it out. But if it's Jameis or Taysom, I don't love it. So they either go to the Taysom Hill offense, which is run heavy and you don't need a ton of receivers, or Jameis is just so aggressive and chucking it down the field. It's going to be 4-12 or 12 what is it now? 5-12. The 17-game schedule.
No, it's messing up everybody.
But they're good everywhere else, right? They got a good D line and a pretty good secondary and really good offensive line. I just worry about the pass catchers with the new QBs.
Another pass rusher in the first round too. I was like, wow, they just load up there, don't they? I mean,
they have a type.
And it's sort of the Marcus Davenport kind of player, right? He was a rare guy. That pick surprised me. I had not really studied this guy.
Yeah, they said they loved him as like a top 10 to 15 player in this draft too. I think they just found their type, big, long defensive end, Cameron Jordan-like, Marcus Davenport-like, and they just grabbed him. And then, cornerback too, they lose Janoris Jenkins. And you've got to cover the Bucs. You've got to cover good receiver. You need to have a good second cornerback, and that's a question mark as well.
Yeah. All right. How about the New England Patriots? Here you go. Home sweet home, baby. You can tell me all about your beloved Patriots here. But it's really going to come down to have you seen this this new quote by Nick Saban. He's, I guess, speaking at something, and he's talking about how his days with the New England Patriots, that literally, you know, everybody has these inspirational signs wherever they work now, and all these sayings and all this stuff. And the only thing in that entire building was like a single sign that said, "Do your job."
Do your job.
Which is like, I was like, it kind of gave me chills almost.
Yeah.
I was like, that's pretty cool. And but now we've got the Patriots in a situation where, you know, uncertainty at the quarterback position again is where we have to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be much better than last year, right? And I try not to overrate the 1 year because the big Brady versus Belichick and legacy and all that stuff. But Belichick's legacy is not tainted. But I think you can clearly see that the quarterback moves the needle, right? Pretty strong. You know, the quarterback head coach, you've got Montana and Walsh and, Aikman and Jimmy Johnson. You're always connected, but the quarterback moves the needle more than anything else. But what the Patriots did this year is they probably had the worst group of pass catchers, bottom three group of pass catchers the last 2 years, right? You said it on NBC one night. Like, they're doubling Edelman. Nobody else is getting open. That was 2 years ago. Brady can't hit him.
Yeah.
That was all last year, right? So now they at least have a couple tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. Aguilar was a really good deep threat last year if they use him in a similar way. Jacoby Myers is a really good complementary receiver. The guy just gets open. So they're better there. They've got a good offensive line. Belichick knows how to fit the pieces defensively, so you just always trust they'll at least be decent. I think they'll be better. They'll be much better. But if the goal is, Patriots, AFC Championship, and Super Bowl and all that stuff, they got to get much better play out of Cam Newton, or Mac Jones comes in and he's, some level of Garoppolo or Brady 2.0, right?
You know what was interesting about their quarterback decision was that I could see them trading up for Justin Fields and going, all right, we've got
I thought so too.
The old prototype in Cam Newton, and we've got a guy who's going to play that same thing. So we're only going to build one offense to match. But now you've got two offenses. I mean, you've got Cam's offense that is going to be different than Mac Jones, and Mac Jones is going to be more of the Tom Brady kind of offense. As a matter of fact, they go back and they get Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith at the tight end position. And we're going all the way back to some of the glory days of that two tight end set that they made so famous. So what do we get here? I mean, because if they're not ready to go to Mac Jones, which I'd be a little surprised if they were, now you're not even really developing Mac Jones because you're teaching him Cam Newton's offense, which he'll never run.
So I'm less worried about, because I think the concepts are all going to stay the same, right? You're still going to have the same pass concepts that Brady was running 20 years ago and that they were running last year. So a lot of that's the same. I think the difference is on Sunday when you call plays, you're just running more QB power. You're running more plays that Cam likes to run. And then if Mac Jones was to play, you're obviously spreading the ball around and running more pass concepts. But I think I think the concepts themselves are the same. I am interested if Mac Jones is coming out as this guy that's like, oh, he's really smart and good decision maker and all that stuff, but it's a complex offense, right? I mean, part of what made Brady so great in that offense was receivers had option routes and he knew where they were gonna be, and just that chemistry takes time to build. So the perception of Mac Jones as like a quick study and I think it's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be Cam Newton, and they're going to take advantage of QB power and counter and all that stuff and the big mauling offensive line. And I think they're going to slow play Mac Jones. So I think it might be a year of Cam, get Mac Jones acquainted, and then it's his team maybe in 2022.
Just turn it over to the defense and let them try and hold on. I'm not a big believer in that philosophy.
Well, they can win. What they couldn't do last year is they couldn't win a game with their pass game. They couldn't do it.
Right.
They could. The games that they ran for 200 yards and all that stuff, they won, right? And they'll have games this year where they run for 200, 250 yards. But they'll have games this year where they can at least throw the ball a little bit. Cam will play. Cam will produce better if he plays a full season. They'll win a couple of games with the passing game. I'm not saying they're a 14-win team or anything like that. They're a little bit better than they were last year.
Could they turn into New Orleans and have Mac Jones come off the bench when they're down 2 touchdowns and go, okay, we got to throw it. Here you go. Or down 10 points or whatever. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't picture. Have we gotten to the point with Cam Newton that we don't trust him throwing the ball enough to where you would look for alternatives?
I would say the thing about Cam is I describe him similar to Jameis. I describe him similar to like Carson Palmer back in the day. Like we grade every play, right, at PFF. And Cam's always had a high percentage of positives and a high percentage of negatives. So it's this like uncomfortable thing where if you want to get the best out of Cam Newton, you almost have to just let him go and unleash him and say there's going to be a lot of good. There's going to be some bad. You hope to mitigate the bad a little bit. So it's Cam can do it if you do support him and you let him throw the ball down the field. He can do it. But I am interested in this Mac Jones take maybe as being the guy, if they're down and just letting him go.
I don't know. You try and figure it out with all these guys. They've got some familiar faces coming back in. This Christian Barmore should help them inside. Kyle Van Noy comes back to the football team. Trent Brown, maybe the biggest addition, but he's been unhealthy for the Raiders. Just have bad luck. As soon as they get him, it's like he just falls apart. The Minnesota Vikings. This is getting to be a little bit of an intriguing football team as well. Where are you here with these guys? They got. We always talk about their offensive line. Christian Darrisaw comes in there, big giant of a guy, right?
He's a monster.
To be able to try and add something there. Are you high on the Vikings? Are we?
I think they're a team that will surprise because I'm looking at how last year felt like this really. It was a transitional year last year. They brought in 15 draft picks, but you still have a veteran Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is going to succeed when you give him a pristine situation. The line's there, the receivers are there, defense, and the whole thing. So he's not the best transitional quarterback, but he's played pretty well in that system, in part because Kirk Cousins always has receivers to throw to, right? They lose Stephon Diggs and boom, here's Justin Jefferson, who's maybe even better. So they got Jefferson and Thielen, but I think last year's youth movement benefits them this year. And they added a ton of picks this year. And I thought they were shrewd in the draft, bringing in Darrisaw, picking up Wyatt Davis, the guard, in the third round. So they essentially got those two guys for the price of Vera Tucker, what the Jets traded up to get Vera Tucker. It's great process. We'll see if it pans out. It's just great process, right? They may have gotten 2 offensive line starters and a backup QB in exchange for 1 in Vera Tucker. So they traded down, made that move. So I love a lot of the process. I think they'll be better. Comes down to their youth, man. The secondary's got to get better than it was last year.
Bashad Breeland, right, just signed with those guys. Patrick Peterson comes over, so it's going to be the anti-youth from that standpoint. So is it possible? I mean, you never would expect a Mike Zimmer coach team to have the secondary as a weakness. And so now they've gone back to these veteran players to try and fix that. So, but if they don't end up getting healthy and getting a better pass rush than what they had a season ago, it's just not it's not going to matter.
Pass rush has to get better, and that's still Danielle Hunter comes back as of now. So
is he back? I don't know.
Potentially. So
what is his situation?
I don't think he wants to be there, but if he's back and playing, it at least helps because they had nobody last year rushing the passer. They had one of the worst pressure rates in the NFL. So there's a lot of questions. I could just see things getting a little bit better.
Yeah,
in Minnesota.
I mean, they certainly have the weapons. Jefferson was phenomenal last year. Adam Thielen's always going to be a guy that can make plays.
They're really good.
There's Dalvin Cook is going to have that explosive element to him. So I don't know. It's almost like they're stuck in that mid range. I almost wonder. At some point, do they pull the plug on Cousins? And if Kellen Mond shows something and say, what the heck, teams are winning Super Bowls, right, with the ability to go cheap at the quarterback position and then spend everywhere else, I could see Zimmer buying into something like that.
That has hurt their team building effort a little bit, and they were exploring Justin Fields. And so that's one of the biggest stories coming out of the draft. The Vikings had Justin Fields' interest, and then the Bears got him in the same division, right? And that's NFL history changed there for the next 5 to 10 years, and we'll see how that one plays out.
Miami Dolphins. It all comes down to they built a football team around Tua. Now is Tua the guy that can get it done?
He said he didn't know the playbook that well last year. Can you believe that made it public.
I probably wouldn't have said that. No,
I agree.
I probably wouldn't have said that.
This is like what you said about the Giants with Daniel Jones, right? It's just a year earlier where, okay, let's take away a lot of the excuses. The O-line is still a question mark, but Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, and Jalen Waddle. How about that trio? The speed of Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle on the field at the same time.
Gesicki too.
Gesicki, one of the fastest tight ends.
They've got weapons there. A little surprising they didn't. I know in Miami they were a little disappointed they didn't draft a running back, despite what we might say about it. Malcolm Brown's in there, right? I mean, so they've got a little bit, but certainly some questions at that position as well. But the back end, I would think they're even going to get better. I don't think Byron Jones had the kind of year that everybody was expecting. Xavier Howard, certainly one of the best in all of football. As you look at him now, and I got to tell you, I love Jalen Phillips. Now, I know he's got the injury issues and he had the concussion issues coming out, but when you just watch the tape, if you didn't know any of that,
it was fantastic.
He was the best defensive player. I don't care what anybody says. He was the best defensive player in college football last year.
And the Dolphins have done such a good job of drafting a ton, and you can take a chance on a guy like that, right? The payoff of a Phillips, I agree. I mean, he was a top 1 or 2 edge or one of the best defensive players. So the payoff is huge. And if he doesn't pay out, it's like, oh, he was our other first-round draft pick. So the Dolphins have done a good job of taking those chances. So the pass rush should be a little bit better. I agree. I love the way they've built their secondary. I just like a lot of the moves the Dolphins have made. But, of course, it all comes down to Tua. Got to be better next year.
If he's not, is it over?
And, again, like we always, in PFF world.
I mean, you don't go to Jacoby Brissett. He's going to get the full year, right?
Yeah. If they're in the thick of it and they need a spark and they're going to go with Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett's he's a good backup. I mean, that's what he is at this point. So he's not the future in Miami if it's not Tua. If it's not Tua, they're back to drafting and trading up and looking for somebody or trading for somebody next year. But they've got some really good pieces offensively. The line has to get better. But I think if they could force some aggressiveness out of Tua too, you got to force some aggressiveness with those speedy playmakers, and I think they might be able to do it.
The Los Angeles Rams, 10-6 a year ago, second place. Of course, the big quarterback trade with Stafford and Goff going down. But I thought this was a team the salary cap killed this year. You look at the list of the players that are no longer on this football team, and these are not going to be the headline guys, but these are guys in a 17-game season. You better have the depth to survive the length of this season. Michael Brockers, John Johnson, who I still can't believe got out of there. That was the quarterback of that defense. Austin Blythe, Samson Ebukam, Troy Hill, Malcolm Brown, Morgan Fox. These are all guys that played a lot of football. Josh Reynolds for these guys. And you look at the additions, and Matthew Stafford, Deshaun Jackson. Is it enough? I mean, do they have enough right now? Because this is a team that's constantly dumping their first-round draft pick. They're in salary cap hell. They had to make moves to get back under the cap. A little like Atlanta in some ways, this football team.
It's one of the most fascinating team-building strategies, right? They haven't had a first-round pick since Jared Goff in 2016.
And he's gone.
And they are basically saying we want to grab veterans. Fine, Jalen Ramsey and Matthew Stafford and the whole deal. But what it does is it is just the further you get in the draft, the harder it is to hit on picks. And they've done a pretty good job of it in the past, right? You know, you bring in a Cooper Kupp and in the mid rounds. It's like, okay, that's great. They have a few guys like that on the roster. It's just really tough to sustain. And then if you're trading your first round picks for high contract guys, then you get the salary cap issues. And depth is huge in the NFL. 16-game or 17-game schedule, it is, because you don't want to have weaknesses. So I'm a little worried about their secondary. Jordan Fuller did some nice things at safety to replace John Johnson, but you're replacing John Johnson, who has been fantastic. Troy Hill has been great slot corner. He's been solid, very good player. And so they had 3 legitimate corners last year. So now that third corner is a big question mark. Brandon Staley's gone too, so you go from Brandon Staley to Raheem
coordinator
Morris.
of the number 1 defense in football.
Yeah, so there's so many questions there. I think the line's good. I love the way their playmakers are built. I'm a Deshaun Jackson fan, but he's played 200 snaps over the last 2 years.
But when he plays, they're great snaps.
They're great snaps, right?
If all of a sudden he could become that, and then they draft Tutu Atwell in case he doesn't to kind of take that position.
That part of the strategy I like a lot.
It's interesting with Matthew Stafford, and I think that Jared Goff, when you look at some of those throws from a season ago, did he lose a little confidence? And that's sort of what was been eking out of the Rams, that they've set him up for some wide open throws, and he hasn't been hitting all of them. The other part that was there with Goff was, okay, they were great when they would coach him all the way down to the 15-second clock, right? And that McVay would sit there and watch what was happening, make a quick change, they'd get up, snap the ball.
Right.
Does Stafford eliminate some of those issues? Does Stafford now give him the veteran, smart guy who's seen it all, done it all, and now McVay can kind of just turn it over and let the quarterback actually run the show?
I mean, this is one of my favorite storylines of the year. Because you've seen McVay only really with Goff as the head coach. Now, he had Kirk Cousins a little bit, but just like you have a history of Kyle Shanahan going through, and you're like, he did this with Matt Schaub and Robert Griffin, and he made Brian Hoyer look good for a stretch. McVay doesn't have that like laundry list of success stories, but Stafford could be the next guy, right? And so what do we know about Jared Goff? We're going to go learn a little bit more in Detroit. What does he do away from McVay? So I think what they did, look at it in a broad sense, they said, when all is good and we make the right play call, because a lot of McVay's thing is like playing the odds. When they're going to play this coverage and I'm going to call this play to beat it. And Goff generally was pretty good when they did that. But now if he's wrong, which you're going to be wrong a big chunk of the time, it's just the nature of it. Stafford has the feel and playmaking and instincts to do more, right? Or to do something else that Goff couldn't do. So I think they're excited to see that. The problem with Stafford, I think, is has he ever done it from a production standpoint on the field? He's never graded above 83 in our system. Low 80s quarterback the last couple of years. That's good. It's solid. And you add that with the McVay, it could be enough. But there's some people think Stafford's like Dan Marino coming over, and other people think he's like, oh, this guy who's never won anything, right? He's somewhere in between. And I can't wait to see which part of that spectrum, like McVay can get him.
He had great receivers in Detroit, too. It wasn't like he didn't have great receivers.
He never had a good running game, as much as we poo-poo the running game here. He never had a good running game, and the Rams will give him that. They'll give him the play action stuff and everything. But it's not like Stafford's been playing with, scrubs over there as far as receivers go.
All right, moving on to the San Francisco 49ers now. It's really hard for me to not pick them to go to the Super Bowl again because I picked them to win it last year, and I'm still bitter because the whole friggin' team fell apart, and there was no chance that they could win it. Again, we got to start with the quarterback position. I assume that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be starting the season, and probably in a best-case scenario, he carries them right through to a Super Bowl, and Trey Lance is then developed, and you get full value for Garoppolo in a trade, and blah, blah, blah. You can go right down the list here. What do you think happens at quarterback this year?
Do you think that's the plan? I mean, I just feel like they want to give it to Trey.
Already?
Right away, yeah.
But this team is loaded for bear. I mean, this team could run right out there. In my opinion, they had a great shot to win the Super Bowl a season ago, and just lost everybody. There was just no way. I mean, they got crushed with their injuries.
So this is like the opposite of what we were talking about with the Patriots, right? Where you've got Cam Newton as the veteran and Mac Jones as the rookie. But with Trey Lance, what I think happens here is because of his rushing ability, you can ease him in just a little bit, right? Those are plays where you just put the ball in his hands and you let him run and you create offense without having to rely on him making decision after decision after decision. And then it's like, okay, in a given game, you drop back 25, 30 times. How many of those are how many of those are really pressures on the quarterback? Go make a play. Half of those are play action, So I feel like Trey Lance can be the starter right away. I'm intrigued by what you're saying, though, because I think there's a comfort level of, I think Garoppolo, if all those guys are healthy, Garoppolo if he's healthy again, spread the ball around with Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and they'd be fine. I just think they want Trey Lance to be the guy and that they could do it a little bit with the run game.
I do too. I think they want him to be the guy too, but I'm going to try and value my organization at its maximum value. And to me, the maximum value comes if I can trade Jimmy Garoppolo at the trade deadline, which is, it used to be end of October. I don't know when it is now.
They pushed it back a touch.
A little bit, right? But so let's say Jimmy Garoppolo starts the first 8, you go 6-2, 7-1, which this team is fully capable of doing. Garoppolo is playing well. 3 or 4 quarterbacks are hurt in the league on good football teams. And now Trey Lance walks in and you trade Garoppolo for a minimum a second, maybe a first if a team gets desperate in that situation. Or maybe even the New England Patriots fall apart, right? They go back to New England. All of a sudden they, give them back their second round draft pick, whatever. But I think that maximizes not only your chance of winning, but your chance of adding value to Garoppolo in a midseason deal. That's how I would play it. So.
Yeah, that's probably your best case scenario. And then I just look at how much they gave up. And so anytime you draft a quarterback, though, I look at it and I'm like, you have to do what's best for Trey Lance, right? Like your whole organization, as great as Kyle is, as great as the rest of the team is, it all comes down to how good Trey Lance is at some point in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And if you think that is putting him out there and taking his lumps, if you think it's sitting a whole year, if you think it's putting him in week 8, I think it's whatever is best for Trey Lance. And I just have a feeling they're going to try to put him out there earlier rather than later.
Yeah. So the improvements on the offensive line, in theory, Alex Mack comes over at center, Aaron Banks, draft pick out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe the surprise of the year, and of course they get Nick Bosa back, which was the killer. That was just the one that they couldn't overcome. Debo was hurt all year. George Kittle was hurt all year. It was ridiculous. Their best players were hurt.
We never got to see that offense.
We never got to see it. You never got to see it. But the good news that came out of the year was Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett was right. We thought he was going to be the greatest corner of all time, and whatever year it was, 17, 16, whenever it came out, and then nothing for 3 or 4 years, and then came back last year and showed it again. And is going to probably let him move on from Richard Sherman at this point.
Verrett was fantastic. Yeah, so in his second season, 88.4 PFF grade. It looked like the next great corner. He's only 5'10", but it doesn't matter. He plays outside. He was fantastic. After that point, he played 100, 200 snaps, 250 snaps, then 60, then 0, then 14. That was his career. And then last year, he finally gets up over 800 again, and he was really good. So that's huge, having him, because, they don't have Sherman on the roster as of right now. So Verrett, relying on him once again, he showed that he could stay healthy. It's absolutely massive, because that whole secondary needed to re-sign those guys and bring them back. And they're not going anywhere if they can't stay healthy back there.
How concerned are you without Saleh there? So these guys were built to play in that system, and they understood that system. I'm sure they're going to stay with it, as they move on. But he was a big personality in the room out there, and he's proven that now as the head coach of the New York Jets. And the Mike LaFleur not being there. I mean, at the time that Matt LaFleur went to Green Bay, he wanted to take his brother with him to be the offensive coordinator, and Kyle Shanahan was like, "Hey, I can lose one of you LaFleurs. I can't lose both of you." And now they're both gone.
I think that's always a factor. I mean, I think with the Rams, we're talking about it too. You lose Brandon Staley. How do you run the same defense? Is there always a twist? And I think defensively, more than anything, that emotional aspect that Saleh brings matters, right? I mean, there's only so much rah-rah you can do on the offensive side of the ball, but defense is such an emotional side of the ball, right? I think that the personality probably matters as much, if not more, than the X's and O's, right? As far as getting guys to play hard and do what you want there. So I think, absolutely a question mark there in San Francisco.
I was a little surprised at the draft pick of Trey Sermon. Not that he's not a good player, the running back out of Ohio State, but he's not the 4-3-5 guy that they typically had. And I always had it in the back of my brain that that's how they were built. They were built to go 4-3-5 as fast as they could outside zone, make your linebackers fly over, throw behind you. And now, of course, with Trey Lance bootleg out the back end of it. But Sermon must have something else in this that they liked.
He makes guys miss. You got a little bit of power, and I do wonder, they've gone to more of a downhill attack at times over the last couple of years. So the Shanahan scheme, since forever, it's the wide zone and it's one cut and it's just what we do. And from Terrell Davis to Alandis Gary, it doesn't matter. Like interchangeable running backs, they're all going to be good. But it was generally that same scheme. But what has made Shanahan great is just continuing to add wrinkles to it, adding jet sweep, adding ways to keep defenses off balance. And maybe it's just the downhill aspect that Sherman brings that's a little bit different from like a Raheem Mostert, who does have that fourth.
Maybe that's what they wanted, just to have both in there. But, man, they have hit home runs in the running game with those speed guys just out flanking people.
That's what I would – I mean, if I had that good of run blocking and play calling, just give me the fast guy, right? If you're going to block it up for him, give me the guy that can take it to the house.
Yeah. Now I know why you guys always do 2-hour podcasts, because I can't there's always things I want to talk about. I'm going to try to pick it up here. Los Angeles Chargers, we all know that we're excited about what's going on with this football team and what they may be able to do. And I guess probably the one issue that we've always talked about with this team is that offensive line. And boy, they took some big steps here. They could be really, really, they could go from bad to really good if Slater ends up being the pass protector, draft pick out of Northwestern that we thought. Filer comes over from Pittsburgh. Corey Linsley comes over from the Packers. Brian Balaga, who had a history of the injuries and all the different things. But if this thing all sort of came together up front, and Herbert was as good as he was a season ago without that offensive line play, what could this team be?
They could be really good, man. I mean, they've made good on paper offensive line moves in the past that didn't work out, but they made the right moves. Corey Linsley was the number one free agent center. Matt Filer was a top 100 player for us on the free agency board, and Rashawn Slater was our number 2 tackle in the draft. And they had the second worst pass blocking grade in the NFL last year, which I think there's two ways of looking at Justin Herbert's performance last year. There's the PFF way of saying, well, he was so great under pressure, there's no way he'll keep that up. But the other way is he won't be under pressure as much, because it's actually really impressive what he did with that bad of an offensive line. That usually destroys offenses, and Herbert did show the ability to still make those big throws, big time throws down the field. So obviously encouraged if you're a Chargers fan, good group of receivers to play to throw to, deep threats that broke out last year, and Tyron Johnson. Bring Jared Cook into the mix at tight end. It will come down to that line, though. I mean, it's difficult for Herbert to maintain his performance if he's under pressure as much as he was last year.
Are you concerned at all about the secondary with, they do make a little change with Casey Hayward in there. They draft Asante Samuel. But the big news has got to be Derwin James. Can he be back and healthy? Because, God, what a difference maker he is.
He's so good. He could play anywhere. I think he could legitimately be an edge defender if you asked him to.
Yeah.
He could be a linebacker. Yeah. That doesn't exist in the world. He's a safety. I hope he plays and is healthy. And then the Brandon Staley factor that we keep referencing here, right? I mean, he took the Rams in 1 year and he played his version of quarters and kept the ball in front and never gave up big plays. And we get to see Staley against Mahomes twice a year. That minds the guy that took away deep ball better than anybody in the NFL against Mahomes twice a year. So they've got the ability, but it's one of those, like, next year at this time, the Chargers probably need to invest at corner a little bit more in the entire secondary.
I was going back through and trying to watch our games from last year, and Houston was the season opener, and that was exactly what Houston tried to do defensively. It was just like force them to go the long, hard way, and they did. You know, so it's not like Kansas City couldn't do it, and it's not like that Mahomes can't do it, but there's a creativity really to Staley that I really like. He has a way of putting star players in a position to be stars, and so I'm really curious about this team. I can't wait to watch them this year. The Los Angeles Raiders, sometimes you just don't know what to do. We watched them go toe to toe with the Chiefs in Oakland or in Las Vegas, and you just go, wow, this team really, they can play with anybody at times, and they just can line up and get it done. And then the Aaron Rodgers rumors were out there, and, are they going to end up doing something? And to some extent, you almost have to feel a little sorry for Derek Carr sometimes. Feels like all they're ever trying to do is find that next superstar to come in there.
Yeah, just a weird offseason for me for the Raiders because, if you're a fan and you look, a lot of times you look at the last season and you think, okay, here are the things we were bad at, let's get better. So the Raiders took one thing that looked good on paper going into this year, which is the offensive line, which wasn't good last year because everybody got hurt. But on paper, it looked pretty good. And then they got rid of Rodney Hudson and, they did bring back Richie Incognito, but they traded Trent Brown. Again,
Gabe
Jackson's gone. Yeah. So now it's like, okay, you thought maybe the offensive line was going to be fine. And then it's like, all right, let's get some more receivers and we need corners and we need pass rushers. But then they had to spend to build up the offensive line again. So it feels like this, while every team is getting better and better, at least you feel more optimistic about these other teams, it feels like a whole bunch of lateral moves. And then they spent a ton of money on Kenyon Drake to be a backup running back behind Josh Jacobs. So that's where I just have concerns about the Raiders. I think on the positive side, if Gus Bradley comes in and just their secondary is a better fit for what they're doing, Casey Hayward has played well in his system and Trayvon Mullen probably fits well. And maybe Jonathan Abram, well, if he's still playing, can be that box safety and they bring in Trevin Merrig from the draft. They could be better in the secondary, but it's a big could. They need to be. It just felt like one step forward, one step back this entire offseason, though.
I mean, it really is. They do bring in some people here, but the quest for the offensive line is just seems like it's never stopped in Oakland.
And they just draft their guy. They keep drafting. Not that our draft board is the end all be all or anything, but Alex Leatherwood was 40th on our board and they got him at 17. They keep drafting guys 20, 40, 60 spots ahead of just where the consensus has them. And it's not like they've necessarily hit on those picks.
But you can feel that they want to be sort of the Tennessee Titans, right? That they would prefer to be able to run the ball, pound it in there, go the play action off of it. Sure. They bring back in Nick Martin in here, Yannick Ngakoue comes in. You mentioned Drake, Solomon Thomas, the third overall pick for the 49ers. A few years ago, John Brown from the Bills, who
I liked that.
Add another speed element to make up a little bit for Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar, you go, oh my God, he had so much production for you last year. How could you possibly let him get away to New England? But it was sort of a one-off, right, for Aguilar. Yeah. We really hadn't seen a whole lot of that other than what we saw. But is this offensive line better than what they were a year ago? I think we're going to have to wait and find out. And can Leatherwood play tackle? Is that what we're talking about now? Is he the right tackle for this team?
I think he's probably the right tackle. I think that's what they want him to do. I mean, I can understand liking Leatherwood. He had some incredible run blocks. You can see the good stuff.
I mean, in the run game, he will move the needle in the run game for them, I think.
Yeah.
In the pass protection, there were too many times that people simply ran right past him, to feel like, this is going to be the answer here.
Slow in his pass sets, hands not great. I mean, so look, Gruden's done some great stuff offensively there. I think Carr's played pretty well and everything. The offense has been Henry Ruggs. There's a lot of pressure on him to be worth, that first round draft pick from the previous year. But their defense, they haven't had any answers defensively. And you got to play it again. You got to beat the team in your division, right? You're always trying to beat the Chiefs, and it doesn't feel like they're making moves to close ground on the Chiefs.
You better be good in the secondary. You're going to beat that team. So, speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, this is the Orlando Brown trade, probably the headliner for me, getting rid of both their tackles and Kyle Long coming back, Joe Thuney. So you're talking about a remade offensive line. You go, this is pretty good, Austin Blythe. I mean, if you're going to remake your offensive line, and clearly that's what they did after the Super Bowl, they went, oh my God, we got to keep our guy alive, right? But this is pretty good. It's not. Who would you say out of those? Is there an A-lister? Is Orlando Brown the A-lister among the acquisitions here, or where would you look at that offensive line?
I don't think they have a star, but that's fine as far as offensive line goes. Orlando Brown at left tackle, really good. Joe Thuney, they spent a ton of money. He's been a top 8 to 10 guard over the last couple of years, so he's really good. Austin Blythe is solid. They draft Creed Humphrey to eventually replace him. He'll probably be a solid player. And Mike Remmers is, he got beat up in the Super Bowl a little bit, but they moved him to left tackle. But he's a solid right tackle. So if I say solid, you usually have a top 7 or 8 offensive line. That's the nature of it. So they're in a good spot there. My concern is just what the investment looks like in the line when they have to pay Orlando Brown, and if they can keep the speed and the way that they attack defenses, keep that in the coming years.
I mean, and that's going to be the question, right? I mean, there's no way you pay Patrick Mahomes what you paid him and not pay a price somewhere else here. Sammy Watkins, for example, already gone. I like Orlando Brown. They kind of get a 1-year trial with him before they have to decide whether they want to pay him or not. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, Al Michael's favorite guy, comes back. Lucas Nang, another, if I remember correctly,
Chiefs fans love him. They're going to tell you he's going to the Pro Bowl.
He's going to the Pro Bowl the whole year. But this is they're the team. They're still the team in the AFC that you got to find a way to get around. And probably the big surprise for me with this team last year was just how good L'Jarius Sneed was from the opening day on. He gave them and now has given them the ability to move on from Brashad Breeland as well.
Yeah, and Travarius Ward has played solid at corner. And look, Spags, Spagnuolo,
he's good.
He's done a really good job there.
He's really good. You know what it is? Because they play everything. And then they've got the X factor of Tyron in the middle of the field. Yeah. And they have unleashed him in such a way where you see him playing positionless football a little bit in there. Let his instincts take over and try and find. And as a quarterback, now you got to be a little leery of,
right.
He doesn't really have, this isn't cover 3 where he's going to drop to the flat. This is, all right, he's like that X factor there where you don't know what he's going to do.
And it's generally between the numbers, right?
Yeah,
he's playing that robber role. But that's like the money zone in the NFL. So if there's one thing Spags has done is taken away the money zone and just, we want to throw the ball outside the numbers, throw the ball short of the sticks, because they don't give up a whole lot of completions beyond the first down marker. And that's all the Chiefs needed, was to just not give up 30 points a game. All right, and let the offense generally win games. And I know the last thing we saw was the Super Bowl and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, who was the third playmaker. I still think that's the biggest question mark on this team. Can you flood the field with enough people that make the defense scared beyond Hill and beyond Kelce? So I think that's always going to be the biggest thing. The defense just has to stay in that range it's in right now, middle of the pack, and they'll be fine. But the Mahomes years, I think, are going to be defined by their pass catchers. Whether it's Hill plus Kelce and whatever else they have, or eventually replacing those guys.
Jacksonville is my most intriguing team. I really look at these guys and I go, are we going to look back now and go, why didn't we see Jacksonville winning 10 games this year, right? If you didn't know anything else about it, and you really believe that Trevor Lawrence is the next generational talent, which is the way that he's sort of been, since his freshman year. Yeah. That's what we've been saying about him. Are we crazy to not think that this is a 10-win team right now?
Only because of the division. I think the AFC South, you can go. The Colts are pretty good, and the Titans are better now. I think with Julio, the Texans are a tough team at the moment. It depends. Like, what are the expectations for a generational quarterback? What can he do right away? So I always compare to Andrew Luck or even Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson's career at Clemson kind of mirrors Lawrence's at Clemson and similar. And Watson was good right away. He was good, but they weren't carry the team right out of the gate either. So I think expectation should be he's going to be a good quarterback. And then it comes down to, again, the offensive line's got to hold up. They have issues at tackle unless Cam Robinson takes a big step forward this year. I like their group of receivers. DJ Chark. Urban was harsh on DJ Chark. He said some harsh things. Got to play tougher and stronger and all that stuff. But I like, Chark's a deep threat, and Marvin Jones was a nice addition. So they definitely have a lot of the pieces. And Urban and Trevor, I can't wait to see this one.
It's definitely an interesting thing. They end up their Shaq Griffin comes over at the cornerback position. They've taken cornerbacks in each of the last couple of years. Tyson Campbell, the kid out of Georgia, comes in with the 4.36 speed. Travis Etienne, don't draft a running back, but is he really a running back or is he really a receiver? And you've got somebody that Trevor Lawrence is comfortable with right away. And I just know Urban. Urban, he's never lost. I mean, you look at his track record, where has he not had good teams immediately? I mean, He comes in there And a little like Jimmy Johnson coming out of college. He comes in with a bit of a reputation. Jimmy Johnson, his first year in Dallas, it was like Marine boot camp down there. They were trying to kill people. But what came out of that was of the foundation of a really good football team. Now, maybe it's not this year, but I think that all the little sniping stuff that happens in Jacksonville and happens when you have a losing organization, it's not going to happen down there with Urban.
You asked him about it too. Like, how do you go from, because the two big things college coaches have to do is recruit well and then develop, right? Well, you lose the recruiting. You can't be good at recruiting in the NFL. But I think Urban's always been that CEO type, right? He gets the culture and gets people pointed in the right direction. So I think he'll do fine there, but he also won't have the best talent every year either. So where does that, end up and balance out?
He's got a degree in psychology. He's a devout Catholic. He is a guy that is a unique guy. I mean, he really is a unique guy. And the knock on him at Florida, if there was one, after winning all those national championships, it was that you just give me the talent and get out of the way. Now, there were some questionable characters down there during that time, but they gave him the talent and got out of the way, and he had a couple of national championships that came out of it. Indianapolis Colts now, Carson Wentz comes over, and we've debated this one for a long, long time around here, but his best days were with the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're with his head coach, Frank Reich, and so Carson is an interesting guy. I always try and at least throw in some of the personal stuff with him. And he is he's not a typical caveman football player. You have to be a little thoughtful with him. He's a nice guy. He's a faithful guy. Frank Reich is as well. And you could see where the connection was on the human level. And this is a good team. I mean, I think they're your number one offensive line. Is that right?
Two. Behind the Browns. Yeah.
Behind the Browns, right.
But they're close. I mean, they're right up there.
So you've got enough around this football team with Jonathan Taylor and what they can do running the ball here to where, they're going to have some support for him.
I got to go to what the numbers say here too, right? So with Wentz, we've seen him with a good offensive line before. The Eagles have always had a good offensive line. He's had a top 10 pass blocking offensive line every year of his career until last year.
Yeah.
But he's never had a good group of playmakers. The only time he had a top 10 group of pass catchers was 2017. It was that MVP caliber year. So if we're just looking at it through that lens, and you're saying, I need to try to get this MVP candidate, Carson Wentz, or something close to it, you got the offensive line in place. They did a nice job bringing in Eric Fisher, even though he's banged up. He'll be fine. They're really good up front. My biggest question is they're running it back with T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal and Paris Campbell, who hasn't played a ton, and Michael Pittman was okay as a rookie. And Colts fans keep telling me, that's a great group. Well, I said, well, go compare it to every other group in the NFL. It's not top 20. It's barely top 20 or top 22 or 24. If you want to get the most out of Carson Wentz, I'm not saying like having a Julio there would change everything, in my opinion. So that's my biggest question mark is Wentz is an aggressive downfield thrower at his best. Who's he going to do that with in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I would think the guys that'll take center stage are Mo Alley-Cox, Jack Doyle, and probably Michael Pittman. In my mind, I thought he always loved those seam routes. I thought he loved playing above the rim a little bit.
Big body receivers.
Big body
Alshon Jeffrey
guys.
had some good stuff with him. Yep.
And with the way that they're going to be able to run the football, I do think that some of the play action stuff and the RPO stuff that they sort of hit on will end up being what puts them over the top. I was interested in your conversation about Quentin Nelson, and you really do feel like he's the best of the best right now at playing in the offensive line.
Yeah, he's the best. He crushes people in the run game. You run zone scheme, he's quick enough, technique, fantastic, and he's good in pass protection. He really does it all. And it's been like that since his redshirt freshman year at Notre Dame. Like when you just watch him, it's like, all right, this is just different. He's the guy that film looks great, the numbers look great, and balls people, offensive line, gurus love him. So yeah, Quentin Nelson, I think he's the best in the NFL.
Yeah, Xavier Rhodes had a comeback season last year, which is good for them, and now they end up with Kwity Paye coming in, and that's where they've got to get better. They just have to be able to get after the pass rusher, the passer better than what they did. But the deal for DeForest Buckner was the end-all, be-all for this football team. And if the you'll know how to say the other guy's name better than I, Odembeyo or whatever his name is, if those two guys can start to create a little off the edge, then maybe this team could end up competing. I mean, they were good, right? They almost went up to Buffalo and knocked off the Bills in Buffalo in the playoffs. So it's a legitimate football team.
Colts have done a nice job defensively. Play a lot of zone and getting career years or comeback years out of Xavier Rhodes, as you said, and you could tell that they needed that pass rush the way they drafted. So yeah, they're just solid all around. But of course, it always comes down to the quarterback and what he's going to do in the pass game.
Speaking of always coming down to the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, we still don't know what's going to happen. Peter King today, in Peter's great column that he writes every Monday, talked about, well, what if they just said, all right, Aaron, play one more year, then we'll trade you, right? Give us one more year, and then he'll be whatever he will be, 38 years old, something like that, and then we're going to let you go. There's no answer. There's going to be no continuity. If anything, Jordan Love's going to get some work in camp, which might end up being something that helps them as well. But this is a team that's on the brink. I mean, they've lost the championship game 2 years in a row, right? And so what do you think? How does this end?
If Rodgers is there, even if his mind is right, I think it's going to be tough for him to replicate last year's performance. I mean, it was incredible. He was so good from start to finish.
And he was so angry all year, which helps.
It does. I mean, there's a few athletes where if you doubt them, they're gonna make you pay. And they're usually the great. It's Michael Jordan, it's Brady, and Rodgers is one of those guys. So now it's like, okay, is he mad all season? Is he out to prove it? Is he auditioning for his next team?
It doesn't even have to be a slight. It could be a perceived slight.
Sure, absolutely.
That they create. Yeah, they just create crap. The best one of those I ever heard was Joe Gibbs, and he was working with Mike Ditka in the studio, and I was at NBC. And Joe Gibbs he would say to Mike, he goes, "You used to lie all the time. You used to tell your team that I said stuff about them, and it wasn't even true. You just lied all the time."
That's great. That's the motivational aspect.
They didn't care. Right? Yeah, Dad could just laugh.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what Rodgers has, right? And it's like it's him and Devontae Adams, and they're unstoppable, and they got the best left tackle in the NFL. They got so many pieces. But if you're just talking about Rodgers and the Packers, can him and Devontae dominate the way they did last year? Because if they take even the slightest step back, it's not the best roster across the board. It's a good roster. And it's one of those things, if Rodgers is on the roster, they're a Super Bowl contender. If it's Jordan Love at quarterback, it's like, oh boy, they might be drafted top 10. I mean, it's that big of a difference when you've got that elite quarterback. So
it's just it's so amazing to watch the sort of the circus in the last place that you would really expect it. Green Bay is so all in football, but this is all about respect, and
there's so much human element this year.
So much more than I can ever remember. And I think it's a little product of watching NBA players. I think it's a little product of what happened with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And going down there, but they're still good. It will be interesting to see just how much of a difference this stuff makes from the beginning of the year. Right? I mean, but Robert Tonyan turned into a friggin' star last year. I mean, he can just make players. Alan Lazard was tremendous a season ago. And of course, Devontae was great. So
I will say the NBA comparison's interesting, but only quarterbacks can do that.
Only quarterbacks,
NFL, right?
For sure.
In the NBA, a point guard can do it, a center can do it. Like if you're elite, you make the same broad impact. Only the quarterback makes that level of impact in the NFL.
Do you think this Eric Stokes makes a difference at the cornerback position? I mean, Jair Alexander's fantastic. Adrian Amos, good, solid player. Savage, I think, is going to continue to get better. But Stokes at the other, we saw the vulnerability at that other cornerback position last year.
Yeah, Kevin King really struggled. The question here is, in our draft guy, Mike Renner, Stokes graded well and he's fast, but he's fast in a straight line. They're going to play less man cover. He's a good man coverage guy. We said, hey, man coverage teams, you love them. They're going to be playing. They got the Staley scheme coming over, right? We've got Brandon Staley's got his own tree now. He's a coordinator for 1 year, but it's the Vic Fangio tree. It's you're playing with your eyes on the quarterback,
which is a great tree.
It's a great tree. It really is. There's just forward-thinking principles in there that make sense in today's NFL. So I don't know that he's the best fit, and it's a lot of pressure on Eric Stokes if he's going to be the starter as a rookie.
Let's go to the Detroit Lions now, because this is getting really interesting. Dan Campbell, we all had a good laugh with his press conference and everything that went with that. But this team is starting to compile some football players. You know, the draft fell to them with Penei Sewell coming in at tackle. You get the feeling that they're going to be a physical, try and maul you kind of football team up front. Your initial thoughts on where we are with the sort of the changeover? They ate Jared Goff's contract. There's really no other way to say that. He's going to get a chance. Brad Holmes was the general manager under the general manager with the Rams. So obviously he thought very highly of Goff and was willing to bring him over. So I think they're going to give him a shot. You know, they're going to see what they've got here.
Yeah, I think it's a regime that has 6-year contracts. You know, and that's what happened with
like
Shanahan and Lynch, right? So you said, okay, we don't have to find the quarterback right away. And that's what San Francisco did. They kind of slow played it. It got Jimmy G and what have you. So I think the Lions said, okay, yeah, we'll take on Goff's contract, but give us the draft picks. We're looking to the future. And they built, as expected, after the kneecap biting, press conference, it's like, of course they're going to draft. I mean, I thought they were going to draft Micah Parsons. I thought they were going to get that hard-nosed linebacker, but They got Sewell falls to them. So you get a tackle. You get 2 defensive tackles with your next picks. And if you were saying, what are Dan Campbell and Chris Spielman, involved there too? Like, what are they going to do to start this franchise? It's, as expected, I think, in the trenches. So for this year, I don't think the roster looks great. One of the worst receiving groups in the NFL. The secondary has to be better, just with a scheme change, just not being out on an island playing man and then transitioned into zone midseason. So, they'll be better in some areas, worse in other areas, but I think it's just they're moving the organization in the right direction.
The problem is that defensively they were 32nd in points, 32nd in almost every category.
They were really bad.
They really were bad a season ago, and that's not what you would have expected. Okudah didn't end up living up to what everybody thought that he might. Trey Flowers, Romeo Okwara on the outside. I mean, they've got some guys that can play. It's just a matter now, can they begin to put this thing all together? But you like it when you get pillars in the draft, and Penei Sewell certainly is going to be one of those pillars going forward for them.
Yeah, Sewell's good.
The Denver Broncos, moving on to them, and not the quarterback. And I think that was the great debate going into this one. Were we going to end up with a replacement for Drew Lock? You can't avoid the Aaron Rodgers shadow. I mean, is that still the possibility? Because this roster overall is one that you take a look at it and you go, man, if you're Aaron Rodgers, drop me right in here next to Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler and Cortland Sutton. And, we've got enough in the running game. And you could just see this being, the team that, man, it would be something else if you could drop Aaron Rodgers in here.
That's it, man. It's a really good roster. What they did doubling up at receiver last year, and it didn't pay off right away last year. Jeudy dropped a ton of passes, and KJ Hamler dropped a ton of passes. But I always like to, if you build your receiving core like a basketball team, right? You have different styles, and you've got big guys and short guys and quick guys, and they've got all of that. And again, with Rodgers would maximize all that. Teddy Bridgewater might be able to maximize it more than Drew Lock did, at least from a distributor aspect. Bridgewater's more along those lines. Drew Lock is a little bit more volatile. So I like the way the offense is coming along. The O-line has a few questions, but then the defense, we were just talking about Vic Fangio. Well, Vic Fangio is the head coach. He's got a recent history of making defenses better. Von Miller's coming back. Bradley Chubb's coming back. And this is one of the best secondaries in the NFL.
No doubt. I mean, no doubt. Simmons probably the best safety in the game right now. Kareem Jackson's had an amazing conversion from the cornerback position back to play safety. And I can remember when he was with Houston, I was thinking, this dude's pretty good, because I always saw him as a cornerback. They pick up Darby. Callahan hopefully comes back healthy for them this season, and Kyle Fuller on the outside. So they're right there, but Drew Lock, in my mind, and Javonte Williams is going to help him. The running back comes in that everybody loved out of North Carolina. Drew Lock, in my opinion, though, just has to play quicker at the quarterback position. I just felt like, just take a check down every once in a while. Just play the position. And he's a dynamic kid. I really like him. He's a fun kid to talk with. But he needs to just take a few more wins every once in a while. Just pad your percentage. All quarterbacks are doing it. Just take a couple of wins, check it down some. Noah Fant, let him catch it and run it every once in a while. So
decision making hasn't been great for Locke. So I think if Rodgers isn't there, it feels like it's probably Bridgewater's team.
We shall see. Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys and another team decimated by injuries a year ago. There's no way to not start with obviously Dak Prescott, but you lose both tackles and arguably the best guard in football. Lyle Collins played 2 games, I think. Zach Martin played and missed like 6, and Tyron Smith played none. So your 2 worst offensive linemen were the only 2 that survived the year. And oh, by the way, you're playing with a backup quarterback. So you've got a lot of fancy hood ornaments on the outside with this receiving core, but nobody really to run the engine.
This is the example, right? As much as I'm like, give me 3 receivers, give me 4 receivers, but the offensive line can't be bad. So if you said, hey, the Dallas Cowboys offensive line is going to rank 27th in our rankings at the end of the season, it's okay. Something's gone wrong here, and it's exactly what you listed. It was mostly injuries, but with those guys back, even Tyron Smith's not the same guy he once was. He was like the prototype for a few years. He's still really good. So if the offensive line's back and healthy, Dak's back and healthy, and now he's spreading around. CeeDee Lamb could be up at Amari Cooper's level. I think, I don't know how you rank a Cooper, but he gets open. He's not Julio. He's not A.J. Brown. He's not like this freak athlete that's going to take over.
But he's a great route runner.
He's great.
Great releases.
But that's Cooper and Lamb and Gallup. What a trio.
Yeah.
That is. If this offense is healthy, it looks like early last year where they were putting up points left and right. And then it comes down to, okay, what's Dan Quinn going to do with this defense? They just need to get better. They just need to not be, bottom 5, bottom 10 like they were last year.
Do they feel overloaded at inside linebacker to you?
Huge overload.
Like Micah Parsons, he's a phenomenal athlete. You watch him play, he can run all over everywhere. And one thing about, Bobby Wagner in the Seattle defense, which is what Dan Quinn's going to play. And, you got to have a coverage guy in the middle of that field. And certainly, Micah Parsons athletically is going to be able to do that. Not that he did a lot of that.
He didn't, right?
Right. He didn't
he's got
do
the skill
much.
Set. Yeah.
He's got the skill set to be able to do that. But not only do you've got Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch, Micah Parsons, but they also have signed some of these safety types that are really going to play linebacker for them.
Yeah.
Right. That's the whole thing. So, and now we have to find out about the secondary and all these guys. Diggs came on a little bit, I guess, at the end of the year. Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown, but they're going to be challenged.
Yeah, linebacker's not the position you want to be like 7 deep.
No, that's
NFL.
what I was thinking.
There are 2 starters, right? There are 2 starting linebackers, unless you're the Seahawks, and maybe Quinn's going to play 3 linebackers, but I wouldn't recommend that a ton either. And Keanu Neal is like, he used the Cam Chancellor as the prototype, but Keanu Neal was the other prototype for the strong safety role in that defense. He did it for Quinn. So that's the only curious thing about the Cowboys, unless they're going to flip Jalen Smith and Vander Esch for future draft picks.
And Ezekiel Elliott, we've talked about it, but the $90 million man. It was probably the poster child for our case that it really is more about the offensive line than the running back. He had career lows last year, really did not look like he was as effective. But when you take out both tackles and your best guard, your running back's going to pay the price for it. The guy that I almost feel sorry for sometimes in this offense is Tony Pollard. I think Tony Pollard can really play.
He's legit, yeah.
He's just not going to get the opportunities because he's not the guy that got the paycheck. So there you go. Maybe the most interesting team in the league to talk about now is the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, of course, came on and played so well, knocked off Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, and some of the stigmas sort of fell by the wayside. Kevin Stefanski really just doing a tremendous job over there with this bunch. And Andrew Berry, you go right down the list. Jimmy Haslam's really committed to the analytics and building this team out the right way. And they've got it all sort of in place. But I was interested with your offensive line rankings. This was your number one ranked offensive line from a season ago. And the difference in Baker Mayfield from the year before they took Wills, and he was just running for his life all the time, and the confidence that he had to stand in there and play action off of these two great running backs, Chubb and Hunt. It was just a different looking team.
Completely different. I mean, in 2019, you saw it early. Did you guys have the early Sunday night game with the Browns, I think, in 2019?
Against the Rams,
The
maybe?
Rams, right?
Yeah.
Even just like early in the season, you saw Baker just peaking, right? He's like, Greg Robinson's my left tackle. I don't know if I like that. And Robinson, to his credit or whatever, even if he wasn't making a bad block, you can see him peaking. He's feeling it. He was far more confident last year.
Yeah.
He did start out slow. And even me and us, the biggest Baker Mayfield fans, I started to doubt a little bit. But he was second highest graded quarterback for us since week 8. So he started to get much more comfortable. And yeah, they just did a lot of smart things on the offensive line. Joel Bitonio and J.C. Treader have been there for a while. They paid Jack Conklin to play right tackle. He had a career year. They bring in Jedrick Wills in the first round, move him to left tackle. He's solid there. And then they hit a home run with Wyatt Teller in the run game, especially because third, fourth year breakout type of guy who just absolutely mauled people, fit well in their scheme. So they just did smart things. You pay a guy here, you draft a guy there, and you hit on a young breakout candidate, and that's how you have the best offensive line in the league.
And they did a great job with the draft as well. Greg Newsome, maybe a guy that not everybody knew who he was, but he is just going to be, in my opinion, one of those rock solid cornerbacks that's going to play 10 years, and he's not going to get you beat. I mean, he may not be the greatest of the great, but opposite Denzel Ward, you've got to have somebody over there that can play. And you don't know what these other guys are going to end up being, but Delpit is still sitting there. You've got John Johnson, you signed at the safety position. I talked about him on the Rams. He was the quarterback of that defensive team. So Greedy Williams, you don't know what he's going to be, coming back into this lineup. But to get J.O.K., Owusa, Koromora, I'm terrible with these names. I'll get them by the time we get ready to do the games.
Yeah, you do it well on the big broadcast.
I practice. Believe me. And then even the young wide receiver they got, this track star out of Auburn, this Anthony Schwartz. You add that kind of component, and we're burying the punchline here, the lead, in that Odell Beckham is going to come back. And that is almost a weird thing that we have to talk about because they were so much better after Odell Beckham left. And are you buying that there's something to that? Did he just start to balance out the offense? Did he not feel the pressure to get the ball to him? How are we explaining that?
I want to know what you think of that, too, because it doesn't always make sense to me, right? So Deshaun Watson last year lost DeAndre Hopkins, and he still had a good group. He had Brandon Cooks and he had Will Fuller, but he did a better job of spreading the ball around. So the receiving corps probably got a little bit worse in Houston, and Deshaun Watson got better. We've seen Matthew Stafford do that with Calvin Johnson, right? You lose Calvin, and he was still pretty good. I think we definitely saw Baker and Odell Beckham in 2019 and early last year were just not on the same page. Like there was just something off, and Baker was more comfortable without OBJ. And I hate thinking, oh, well, that's it. As soon as OBJ leaves, Baker's fine. We don't need him because we'll get more evidence either way this year. But I think Odell Beckham is still really good, right? He could still make the one-handed catches. He could still get open. He's still good after the catch. I'd like to think he'll be more of an asset than detriment to this offense.
Here's and I don't know this. I'm just going to make something up. You said you wanted my opinion. Sometimes, and I was like this when Boomer Esiason showed up, and we had drafted Eddie Brown and Tim McGee, and they were better players by last year but he still wanted to throw me the ball. I had 10 touchdowns a couple of years before that, and I kind of got that. But sometimes receivers are ad lib artists in the course of a route, so you have to watch them a little bit longer. And I would say Odell Beckham is creative in his route running. And so you can find yourself knowing he's going to get open and staying on it too long instead of going through progressions, where maybe he became a little bit more of a progression kind of quarterback. But you also can't deny how much better the team overall got in Cleveland. 2 running backs that can run like that, the best offensive line in football, receivers that were getting the job done, and a Jarvis Landry kind of guy. So, I mean, this team got better at the end. It wasn't just because Odell, it just was one of those weird coincidences. But in some weird way, maybe it helps the Browns because Odell now saw him win without him.
Right.
And if he's willing now to just fit back into the group, maybe the whole group gets elevated.
In what you described, you could see on film in 2019. There were times Odell looked like he's going to take it inside like a skinny post, and then he stayed flat or whatever it is, right? It was off, and Baker's throwing a timing route, and it's just off. There was so many times, because we chart all this stuff. How many times did I chart an interception where we said miscommunication? And that was the reason. It was a lot of OBJ stuff. So it's a fascinating team. I just think the Browns overall making a lot of good moves.
Yeah.
Smart moves.
I just smart moves. Everywhere you look, you go, that was smart. That was the draft. That was smart. That was good. Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow coming back, and they at least have addressed with Riley Reif the tackle position, the right tackle position. Jonah Williams, the top pick from Alabama, should be fine. For a long time here, it was sort of the receivers were good. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, they're good. And now you add Jamar Chase to that. And you go, hello, right? Now there's somebody that is a legitimate, potentially great player on this offense to go along with Joe Burrow, who I think everybody was impressed with what Joe did. Assuming he can get back and play this year, it's getting a little bit exciting in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know. I mean, it was all they debated here in our home of Cincinnati was Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. And I think I always use the Bengals of 2015 as my example, right? Like Andy Dalton's career year is when A.J. Green was out there and Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and a healthy Tyler Eifert. And the O-line was it was good. They were good enough. Dalton got rid of the ball quickly, and receivers getting open quickly protects the quarterback. And I didn't think the Bengals were going to go this way. I honestly thought they were going to take the safe route, give me Penei Sewell, and we'll maybe start him at guard, and then he's our tackle of the future opposite Jonah Williams. But they went the route of give me the guy that's going to get open, give me the guy that Burrow has a connection with, and okay, hey, defenses, cover Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. Good luck. How are you going to cover that trio? And there's still more work to do at tight end. But now I think the pressure's on Jackson Carman, because it was always, if you're going to get Jamar Chase, who's the lineman you're going to get in the second round? It's Jackson Carman.
And he plays guard. So, yeah, I mean, that was the only thing about Penei Sewell that I was a little bit, to me, it was the tiebreaker was, okay, are you going to move Riley Reif? Are you going to move Jonah Williams? Or are you going to play Penei Sewell at guard? And if you're going to play him at guard, is he worth the fifth overall pick?
Even for just a year. It would probably be just for a year.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, I was like, let's swing for the fences here. But at the time, I didn't know if Joe Burrow would be back yet either. So they do lose a little bit on the pass rush side. The Bengals do. Carl Lawson goes off. They lose their top cornerback in William Jackson. Geno Atkins, unlikely to return after a great career in Cincinnati. Your thoughts on what they might be defensively?
Yeah, I think it's going to be it's probably a struggle again. They haven't been great the last couple of years. They've just shown flashes here and there. I think they're 1 year away, I think, in this rebuild. I think we're going to see the offense unless Burrow is just a star this year. And he could be, unless he's a star carrying them. I think the defense is going to have some questions. I like some of the stuff they did in the secondary, though. Chidobe Awuzie and Mike Hilton. If those guys play, those guys could be really good and salvage things defensively. Trey Waynes is solid. We didn't get to see him in Cincinnati last year. Jesse Bates is a good safety.
They paid Trey Waynes, right? They paid him a lot of money. Mike Hilton was sort of the designated slot blitzer for Pittsburgh over all those years.
As a player. Yeah.
He's a player. He's a definite player. And Awuzie, he's good too. He had a few hamstring and different issues in Dallas a season ago, but and they've got a great player in Jesse Bates and at the safety position.
Really good safety.
I mean, it's new. It's going to be different. I hope that they can still get after the quarterback. That's in a very, very tough division. Trey Hendrickson comes over from the Saints and had a good year over there, but to be the lead bell cow pass rusher.
He was their number 3 rusher last year. It's different. It's definitely different.
It's definitely different. The Chicago Bears, not much doubt about what the story is with the Chicago Bears right now, with Fields coming over to play the quarterback position. Your thoughts? I mean, people forget the Bears made the playoffs last year. I forget sometimes, and you go back and you go, oh, that's right. So it's not like – so they made the playoffs, 2 out of the 3 years that Nagy's been there. How soon?
I think you just roll with Fields,
I
man.
do too.
You just go.
I do too.
Get him out there.
I
Look,
do too.
I don't know how to – there was a point in this offseason where it's like, all right, Matt Nagy's on his way out and Ryan Pace, and they got to save their jobs. So do I view it that way, or do I look back and say, you know what? Did they make the right move on Mitchell Trubisky? Obviously, in hindsight, they didn't. But – they made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years, like you said, despite Trubisky playing like a bottom third quarterback. So is that actually a feather in the cap of both Pace and Nagy from a team building standpoint? And they've had a pretty good defense, and that they've won. I know they're 8-8. I mean, it was a bad NFC at the bottom end of the playoff race there, but Fields could be the game changer. It's the NFL soured on him. They didn't like how he holds onto the ball. They didn't like it. It wasn't just a few people. Like, he fell for a reason, but the payoff of Justin Fields, if you could speed him up just a little bit, the accuracy, the little bit of run game that he adds to it, I mean, the payoff could be incredible for the Bears.
Well, and Nagy's that kind of offense too. You've got to think of Andy Reid in Kansas City, which is where his roots are. And at his best, it's misdirection city. I mean, it's like, shoot. I remember calling a couple of games like, good Lord, man, people going in every direction imaginable. Receivers a little concerned for me with this football team. I mean, Allen Robinson's a rock star. Anthony Miller has not turned into what we thought he was going to be. Jimmy Graham's on the back end of his career at this point. They do get Tariq Cohen back, which is going to help. He's a big part of the receiving weapons there. And then it's just a matter of, what they're able to do protection-wise up front. They get Tevin Jenkins. Maybe that'll end up doing something. But, this is not exactly a who's who at the offensive line position either. So
yeah, their line's one of the worst.
Yeah.
On paper, again, I mean, they had 2 solid tackles in Bobby Massey and now I just lost him, the Boise State guy. That's in Washington now. But they were good. I mean, they were solid players. And Tevin Jenkins is a question mark. Jermaine Ifedi's scheduled to be the right tackle. So who did I lose here? What is happening? I know everybody. And I lost it.
Welcome to
Charles Leno. There we go. Charles Leno.
There you go.
I mean, they're not exciting players, but it's like they were just good, solid tackles for their career. So, yeah, the Bears, excited about Fields. I'm with you. Questions with the receivers and low line.
Carolina Panthers, as we continue to move on, speaking of surprises at the quarterback position, they signed Sam Darnold. And everybody goes, yeah, okay, great. But who are they going to take in the draft? And then they didn't take in the draft. They were able to stand pat, and they go to the cornerback position, and J.C. Horn there and his 4.37 speed. So he's the number 1 corner off the board in this draft. Is Sam Darnold, you've been sort of the quarterback guy around here for a long time. Can they fix him?
I think he'll have his best season. I think as much as people blame, he deserves as much blame as Adam Gase. Adam Gase has become like the punching bag for the Jets. But the Jets roster was not good. The O-line wasn't good. The receivers weren't good for the 3 years Darnold was there. He'll have his best group of pass catchers. Robbie Anderson reunited there. Terrace Marshall in the draft. DJ Moore's really good. So he'll have his best group there. Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. The O-line, I think the massive question at left tackle. Cam Irving slated to start. So I think Darnold will be better. But I think for the Panthers, it's like, all right, they took a shot on Bridgewater last year. They're going to take a shot on Darnold. And I think they're looking too at their division and saying, we're not going to beat the Bucs this year. It's a new regime, relatively new. So they're looking at 22 and 23. Get the foundation pieces in place. Take a shot on Darnold. He's got a year to figure it out. They did pick up the option too. But I think they're just going to Joe Brady too as a play call. I think they're going to do a pretty good job of getting the best out of Sam Darnold, but I don't know that they're going to be convinced that he's the guy by the end of the season.
It is going to be interesting. The Brady Christensen is the kid out of BYU, right?
Yeah.
Could he end up playing left tackle for them?
I think he could. He's a little bit older. He didn't get challenged a ton at BYU, but he was really productive. He was good in pass pro, good run blocker. They liked him at guard too. But Cam Irving has a history of just not playing well at left tackle. He's never graded above 50.
Correct.
And Pat Elflein is the starting left guard as of right now. He hasn't graded above 50 for us. So Christensen's probably going to be in the lineup, and that would help save a little bit of that offensive line. That's a big question right now.
All right, Buffalo Bills. Here's the team that is the darling right now. Everybody, they got close. They played really well. They're going to add a few more pieces here. Emmanuel Sanders comes in at the receiver position. They lose John Brown, but basically a trade-off at this point. But Josh Allen's progression, I know they've had a little fun with you over the years.
They have.
To be able to do that. But he's a charismatic, really personable guy that can run like a bear and throw it as far as he needs to. And they like him, you know, and I think that it's getting better. It's getting better as we go. But as good as I thought Stephon Diggs was, I didn't know he was that good. I got to admit, I did not know Stephon Diggs could just dominate the way that he did in Buffalo last year.
He can do it all, right? I mean, you as a receiver, you're either good before the catch or after the catch, or and then there's the catch point, and then, or it's all of the above. I mean, that's Diggs, right? Before the catch, getting open. After the catch, at the catch point, and so he does it all. And I just think the Bills are just like, this is the product. This is how you build around your young quarterback. They got the O-line into a reasonable spot. They went out and got Diggs. The first moves they made were Cole Beasley and John Brown. You started to see that progression, but Diggs put them over the top last year. And even when they lose John Brown, they're like, wait a second, we're going to bring in Emmanuel Sanders. We can't not have 4 good receivers, because Gabriel Davis was a good deep threat for them last year too. And then credit Josh Allen. He turned weaknesses into strengths. He is a good natural playmaker. He wasn't playing well within the pocket early in his career, and he's gotten better at that. And I don't know if he's a superstar every single year. We'll see if he can keep it up. But what a great progression from him his first 3 years.
Greg Rousseau is a guy I liked out of the draft. He's a bizarre-looking candidate.
Gangly,
I mean, it's like you think an NBA power forward got off the bus, and they had him at nose tackle in Miami, and I'm watching him. I'm going, no friggin' way this guy can play nose tackle. I couldn't wait to just scoff at the pick. And I just keep watching, and you keep watching, and somehow the quarterback keeps ending up on the ground, and he's got these 8-foot arms, and he just reaches over and grabs the quarterback or knocks the ball out. So, that was the question. Can they come back and end up with enough of a pass rush to go impact the best teams in football now? Because that's what we're talking about, the Buffalo Bills. Can they win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, 3 defensive linemen in the first 2 rounds over the last 2 years. And then Ed Oliver the previous year. So they're trying to roll 8 deep on the defensive line. Tre'Davious White's a star in the secondary. Since Sean McDermott's been there, they've just been really good, right? As far as the secondary and, keeping the ball in front of them. And for the most part, they got to tackle a little bit better. But they've got the pieces. Again, it comes down to Allen not regressing now, not coming back down to earth. I just always bring up last year at this time, we looked at Lamar Jackson, thought he was a star forever. He is really good still, but he took a step back. So they can't afford Allen to do that next year.
A little surprised they didn't address the cornerback. I thought cornerback and pass rusher were the two positions that they would probably address. But, they do have enough, I guess, at the cornerback position. Tre'Davious White, tremendous. I think the two safeties play really well together, Hyde and Jordan Poyer.
Yeah, they've been the constant since McDermott showed up.
When you get smart people back there, they did bring Matt Milano back. So it's there's enough there for them to make another run. The Baltimore Ravens, again, a football team that has these teams just stay together somehow. I didn't know if Wink Martindale would end up coming back or if he'd be getting a job, or you didn't know on the offensive side, would they stay with this system? Now they've got it. They're basically locked in. They bring in Villanueva to take over on the other side for Orlando Brown, and just rock solid people across the board. Villanueva is just a guy that you'd love to meet, have in your locker room, and military background, and all the different things. The question, I think, was always at the receiver position, but they do end up with additions there. That's with Sammy Watkins and this Rashad Bateman, who, if he reverts back to 2019 form before the COVID and the shortened season and all that stuff, he could be a major factor.
Yeah, and what the Ravens need to do, they make a lot of smart moves. But the thing is, can they win? They won one playoff game, but can they win in the playoffs? Can they win if you take away the run, or can they win in the pass game? They just need more options. The same thing we said about the Patriots. Can you win if you just have to pass it? We know you can win if you dominate on the ground. So having a Rashad Bateman, bringing in Sammy Watkins, making Marquise Brown just not the number one, right? Not making him... let him be the Will Fuller complementary speed threat.
Right.
You put him in the slot and here, match up with him. And if you put your best guy on him, you put your fast guy on him. I've got a Bateman, I have a Watkins, I've got the tight ends to throw to. You just need options, right? I mean, that's football. It's matchup driven game, and the Ravens haven't been able to attack matchups. They're moving in the right direction there, and their secondary is just really good and solid. And you mentioned Wink and what he does, and scheming up pressure and stuff. It's just a great way to win in today's NFL. So they have so many pieces there. And then it's just great business. They traded Orlando Brown essentially for a first-round pick, replace him with Villanueva, almost a lateral move, and they picked up a free draft first-round pick, Odafe Owe, the freak athlete out of Penn State. So it's just smart organization.
They just have playmakers everywhere. The great thing about him is Wink Martindale is that he can scheme up pressures. And they were, what did they end up ranking last year? Second or something like. They're always right there at the top on the defensive end. And then their big playmakers are on the back end. I mean, Humphrey is amazing, right? I don't know whether to call him a slot or an outside kind of guy. Marcus Peters is just always an X factor. You never know what he's going to
He just knows how to create
do on the back end. Yeah. Patrick Queen didn't have quite the impact that I think they were probably hoping for a season ago. So it'll be interesting to see where all the pressure comes from, but generally it's schemed up pressure anyway. And then, three guys over 700 yards rushing, including Lamar Jackson. So what they're going to be on the offensive side. And that's despite the fact that, they didn't have Ronnie Stanley for much of the year, and Marshall Yonda retired. So I think that scheme-wise, they know how to run the football. They know how to generate pressure. They got a great back end, and do the new receivers put Lamar Jackson back in the MVP hunt, or is he just not going to end up proving to be that kind of passer? He was, which is bizarre to talk about a guy who was the MVP and led the league in touchdown passes and all that. So it's a weird year. Atlanta Falcons. Here we go. Arthur Smith ends up there as the new head coach. Dean Pease comes back, the Tennessee defensive coordinator who. Speaking of Wink Martindale, a little bit of that same sort of style, can scheme it up and be able to do that. Your thoughts on the Falcons, and now do they have enough without Julio to get it done.
I would be more excited if it was Julio and Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts, and Matt Ryan can still throw the ball. Matt Ryan's still good. He's solid. They've locked him up for 2 more years, or at least set it up so they got him on the roster for the next 2 years. And then I would say, okay, Dean Pease will make that defense was so bad last year. He'll do what we just described with the Ravens and scheme it up and protect the secondary just a little bit. And I thought that the Falcons would improve. Julio, it said earlier, non-quarterbacks aren't supposed to make that big of an impact, but he does. There's the super elite receiver does make that big of an impact. Matt Ryan, because Calvin Ridley has to be your number 1 now. Calvin Ridley's awesome, but when Ridley's your 2, man, that's really good, right? And then it's like, okay, you just ease Pitts into the mix and let him create mismatches and all that stuff. So I think they're in rebuild mode, man. I think that's ultimately where they are, and the salary cap put them in that situation where they had to trade Julio.
It was amazing. They really had to trade Julio in order to pay their draft choices. I mean, there aren't many teams that have pushed the limit that far on the cap, but I agree with you. I think they're going to try and get it done in rebuild mode now. The Arizona Cardinals, an important year for them. Would you agree? I mean,
huge.
Cliff Kingsbury's got to end up having a year. They were on the brink. They were having a good season, sort of fell apart at the end. Kyler Murray, again, is going to have to get it done. They took a few chances. They're going to end up with A.J. Green. If A.J. Green comes back to being A.J. Green, great. If he was the A.J. Green we saw last year, not so great. They also pick up Rondell Moore, another receiver that I really liked. He was a sort of a powerful little guy, if there's such a thing, right? I mean, that's about how you would have to describe him. Anyway, your thoughts on this offense moving into next year?
Yeah, Kyler's got to take that next step. I think where he's lacking is a little bit over the middle of the field, a little bit of that intermediate level.
Vision.
Yeah, right. I mean, the things where I hate saying, the short quarterback, but like if it is an actual weakness on the field, you got to highlight it. That's what it's been for Kyler. He doesn't throw well over the middle. Him and Hopkins were good. But again, it's like, all right, you got to roll 3 deep, 4 deep as far as playmakers go. AJ Green he didn't get open last year at all. You could tell he was banged up. And if they're creative with Rondell, I think that'll be good. Offensive line's better. And then J.J. Watt, defensively, they added some ballers on the defensive side the last couple of years. J.J. Watt, Isaiah Simmons. It's going to be about all of these freak athlete playmakers making those plays because they've gotten creative there, and then they reshape the whole secondary. So aggressive offseason for the Cardinals, but it comes down to Kingsbury and Murray, year 3, really connecting in that offense.
Yeah, what was interesting is that DeAndre Hopkins he didn't fade away, but the big plays didn't feel like that. I think his average depth of completion, was like under 10 yards or something. I mean, it was like some bizarre thing. And you think of him with some of the great down the field kind of catches that he's able to come up with. Then they go back in the draft and the Zaven Collins, almost the same kind of guys in Isaiah Simmons. So great athletes playing inside at the linebacker position. But as we've talked about before, is that the position you really want to load up with and make plays with? So it's an interesting time. It's a really tough division, obviously, with San Francisco and Seattle and all the things that the Rams can throw at you as well. So this is going to be, you can't wait to get it started, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you've got for this football team, some veteran guys. No more. I can't imagine Larry Fitzgerald's going to be back, this year. But after some great stuff. But Steve, I appreciate going through it. This is what I love to do. This is my passion. It's your passion. You're able to do it a lot better than I can. You can rip through these teams in amazing fashion. So I always like to do this. But it was great fun. I honestly, I can't wait to get the season started. Do I get to call the first game? I get to call the last game. We have the Super Bowl in LA this year.
It's a big year.
So it'll be a lot of fun, and we'll be doing this a lot.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great. Optimism season, right? We're all optimistic about the season.
We're all Super Bowl champs right now. But if you had to say the team to beat, is it Tampa?
Yeah, I think it's definitely Tampa. I mean, there's enough elements there where it's like they could be better. They were good down the stretch. You just expect them to keep it going. But let's not sour on the Chiefs already. They're still really good.
Well, and they fixed that offensive line, and I'm not getting off San Francisco yet either. I do that too many times. I have a team, and then they fall in their face, and then you get off of them, and then they come back and do it the following year. So a lot of fun. We'll do it again.
Sounds good.
I want to thank you so much for tuning in today, and special thanks to my pal Steve Palazzolo. Next week, the hits keep on coming. We have a head coach that has a little quarterback battle on his hands with a rookie who I think everybody's going to really like. Subscribe to the podcast and make sure you get this episode as soon as it drops, and we will see you all next week.